Kai couldn't even imagine that after the tower fell, he would have to go back several years. At that moment, no one could utter the words that they had lost. Many wanted to put an end to it because it was all over. However, Wind, the heavenly rebel, was sure that nothing was over yet. At that moment, everything in the area was dying, but Wind insisted that he would not die. Hercules told him that no matter how immortal he was, he could not behave like that before an external god. He also said that this place will be discovered soon. However, one guy said that the place might have already been discovered. Kai, who was fighting just like the others, approached everyone else. Approaching everyone, he admitted that he thought they were dead. He was then asked if he had returned alone. But the guy didn't want to answer. After listing other names, he was asked if they were all dead. And then Kai answered briefly that everyone was dead. When asked what kind of ball he brought, Kai said it was stupid chaos, but Wind believed it was one of the outer gods. But at that moment, Kai realized that they, the internal ones, could not defeat the external ones. Suddenly, a man appeared in front of him and said that they would not be able to win now. Kai looked at the newcomer in surprise. Then Kronos told him to return to the old world line and start over. Kronos immediately said that he might not be in that world, so Kai did not need to waste time looking for him. Kai was stunned by what he had just been told. He closed his eyes and thought about it, but he immediately said that he would prefer to end everything here. When he was told that this was the last chance, the boy asked who would go back in time. And then Kai saw that everyone was looking at him. However, our hero was not surprised by this. When asked why they didn't choose Wind, the guy replied that Kai was the last one to arrive at the tower. But despite this, Kai quickly adapted to the tower and was on par with those who had divine right and life. Hercules said that the tower could only be changed by rising from the bottom, so they chose Kai. Someone told the guy that their relationship in the past would not be the same as now, and Kai must make himself known. Wind joked that Kai should punch those who don't recognize him. Then Nick told everyone that they had all spoken well. At that moment, Kai thought of them as people who never listened to other people. Having used the thing given by Kronos, the guy promised that he would try. The next moment, at first, Kai did not understand what had happened. Then he thought that the light body, good physical condition, and mana had all disappeared. He realized that it wasn't his body itself that had been sent back to the past. Time had been turned back. Realizing he would have to start over, Kai wanted to know how far back in time he had gone. But at that very moment, some guy hit him. The blonde chuckled and asked if Kai was holding up. Looking at him, Kai at first did not understand what was happening. Looking at the guy's uniform, Kai remembered that this was the university he had attended before, but that was a long time ago. He didn't remember the name of the guy who decided to take it out on him. But when the blonde struck again, Kai dodged. This made the blonde man surprised. Kai asked if it was today or tomorrow. After asking what the number was, Kai said he would turn a blind eye to the last blow, which was weak. However, this behavior only angered the blonde. The next moment, Kai struck back. Now Kai was completely different from the past, and he had 9 hours until the tutorial. There were a lot of people on the streets because the new year was approaching. Will was irritated that there were so many people, but suddenly he saw his friends calling him to them. They joked that he would be fined since he was an hour late, but when he reacted rudely and drank the beer, everyone asked what happened. But he refused to answer and asked for more to be poured for him. When everyone started talking about Kai, Will got angry. After the blow, the guy held his face. At that moment, Kai remembered his name and asked if he had nothing to do on the weekend. And then he told Will to try too, because there was very little time left. Will told his friends that Kai had probably gone to the hospital, but they asked him to know his limits. But Will said that Kai doesn't have parents, so there won't be any consequences. With the thought that in the event of suicide, only Kai would be to blame, everyone decided to have a drink. There were a lot of people on the street because everyone was waiting for the new year. Will then said that, unfortunately, he had sobered up. But suddenly someone noticed Kai. Everyone saw that Kai looked healthy, and Will was surprised that Kai was there. Deciding to say hello, Will went to Kai. Kai turned around when he was called, and then all the guys crowded around him. Then they asked him what he was doing there. At that moment, they were all standing in the middle of the street with a lot of people. Kai silently looked at his watch. Having said that it was almost 12 o'clock, Kai told them to enjoy the last minutes because hell would begin next. But Will asked Kai what kind of nonsense he had been talking about lately. Suddenly, horror appeared on his face. Seeing the weapon, everyone thought Kai had gone crazy. Then they asked Will how many times he had beaten the guy to bring him to this point, and they demanded that he apologize to him. At that moment, everyone was trying to stop Kai in fear. Kai believed that there were the most people here, and this place was suitable. Taking out his weapon, he kicked the suitcase. Kai knew that now it was all about to start. Suddenly, a bright pink color appeared, and pink pillars of light appeared throughout the area. Kai calmly said that time was up. Then Will looked at the guy with fear. First, you need to survive a wave of zombies, which will be eliminated in 30 minutes. Soon there were a lot of zombies around. Kai immediately realized that the number of zombies depended on the difficulty of the tutorial. The more people in the area, the more monsters. In this area, the density of people was extremely high relative to the area of the streets, which meant that wherever they went, there would be zombies. This meant that there would soon be rivers of blood on the streets, and people were given basic weapons. However, Kai believed that this could not even be called a weapon. Throwing away the knife, Kai thought that earlier this would have been enough for him to survive. But the current Kai used new methods. He poured water on his blade. And now I was ready to begin. At that moment, he rushed forward and killed the first zombie. For his first kill, he was given 100 points and his level rose, causing him to feel his body becoming lighter again. He continued killing monsters and leveling up. Kai dealt with them with ease. Then people thought that zombies weren't that strong and they should try too. So they rushed at the zombies. The first man struck hard. However, the axe got stuck in the monster's body. Then he froze in surprise and bewilderment, and the zombie pounced on him. Kai knew that this was impossible with ordinary forces. Zombies are slow and weak, but they do not know pain, which makes them tenacious, and their bite is deadly poisonous. There were those who were able to rise to the high floors, but it was not easy. Suddenly, Kai's blade also got stuck in the flesh. Having kicked the monster, he thought that the effect had already worn off. Kai knew the zombie's weak spot, so he poured water on the blade again. One man said that in the first tutorial, he was able to figure out something incredible. He found out the zombie's weak spot. It was salt. And now Kai took advantage of this. The guy was surprised when he was given 3 free stat points for killing 100 zombies in 10 minutes. Then Kai found out that these points were obtained in the tutorial, but he decided to save the points for later. He wanted to find a suitable place to hunt zombies. And suddenly, he found it. Meanwhile, Will was also fighting. However, his knife got stuck in the zombie's head. He was angry that Kai could kill zombies easily, but Will couldn't do the same. But suddenly the zombie reached out to the guy. With his mouth open, he reached out to the man. But Will kicked him. There were a lot of zombies around when his friends approached Will. They said that the zombies were only getting bigger and that with Kai, they could survive. But Will wasn't happy about the guy's mention. It irritated him that Will didn't know where Kai had gone. But suddenly he turned around sharply. It turns out he was attacked by a zombie. At that moment, Will's weapon broke, and the zombie reached out to the guy. Covering himself with his hands, Will thought he was finished. But suddenly, the monsters stopped attacking, and something fell on top. It was salt. At that moment, Kai scattered salt while running across the rooftops. Because of this, his level rose quickly. After seeing the results of the tutorial, Kai thought that many people had died. Thanks to the notifications, of which there were many, Kai learned that he had killed more than 1,000 monsters. The next tutorial was about to start, and Kai thought there had been no peace for a moment. Suddenly, he heard a voice. Almost immediately, Kai recognized the 6, who said that there was an announcement due to the fact that there was a player who had quickly risen in level. Having mentioned the use of glasses, people were outraged that they did not want to return them home. Points could be spent in the store, exchanging them for items. They could also be used as currency. Kai knew that with a lot of points, one could even become a god, and the store played an important role. He knew that now the fight for level and points began. When the warning ended, a new struggle was about to begin. It was necessary to reach the safe zone, and every 3 hours, they gave 100 points. In each area, a safe zone was created that people needed to reach. Will didn't understand what was happening, but his friends called him to come along. At that moment, they lost one of their friends and assumed that he was dead. But they were more interested in Kai and whether he was still alive. While everyone was discussing how Kai seemed to have a predisposition for using a knife, Will noticed him. He immediately headed towards the guy, and coming up, he grabbed him by the shoulder. Will said that Kai was going the wrong way. The boy promised to take care of Kai if he went with them, but he knew that Kai was safest. But Kai answered briefly that he knew that he needed to go into the circle, and he immediately said that he needed to go somewhere. Finally, he told Will to sit in the safe zone if he wanted to survive, and it was also worth doing without arrogance. This made Will angry. He thought that it wouldn't be safer with Kai, but Will was surprised when his comrades couldn't get through. Then he looked up. Everyone saw the limit of 2,000 people per zone. The next moment, someone attacked from underground. Will heard people screaming. Worms emerged from under the ground and ate everyone, but Kai was fighting them at that moment. Hearing the screams of people again, he remained calm. For the first kill of the monster, he was again given extra points. Kai knew that the worms were not visible because they attacked from underground. So he focused on other feelings. Standing in place, he heard a noise coming from underground, and suddenly the ground beneath his feet broke. At that moment, he reacted and attacked. With just one blow, Kai was able to kill the worm. At that moment, his level was raised again. He was surprised that the level went up from just one kill, but that meant Kai could level up well at this point. Kai decided to go down to the subway. He knew that worms lived underground and dug caves for themselves. That is, he found the perfect place for hunting. Kai discovered a hidden dungeon. There were hundreds of worms there. The guy believed that after finding the nest, there was nothing difficult left in the hunt. At first, Kai wanted to reach level 20. The first worm attacked the guy, but Kai was faster and dealt multiple blows with his dagger. Kai quickly and calmly broke through the monsters. But suddenly, he noticed an object that had fallen out of the worm. Then Kai was surprised that these beads could be obtained in the tutorial. It was interesting, and Kai found the beads charming. At that moment, Kai had a reason to exterminate monsters. But near the safe zone, chaos was happening. Then someone said that those who failed to get into the safe zone could die by biting their tongues. At that moment, everyone is awarded points for the past 3 hours. After this, the safe zone decreased, as did its capacity. Due to exceeding the limit, some people were randomly thrown out of the zone. In this way, many were pulled out. Many of them immediately fell into the jaws of worms. In fear, the survivors began to run towards the center of the zone. Many pushed, wanting to get ahead. Then chaos reigned in the safe zone. But suddenly Will told everyone to be quiet. Everyone turned to look at him in surprise, and he said that they would decide who would die in his place. The guy thought that this was the only way he could get out of here. Will could survive by killing someone, so he chose his victim. Will decided to kill the old man. Kai continued to kill worms. He was able to maneuver easily and deliver precise strikes on targets. At that moment, Kai destroyed all the worms from the lair, and he put the beads in his backpack. Then his level rose, and mana was revealed to him. Kai thought it had taken 3 hours, and he was exhausted, although his body was getting lighter from the increase in level. Kai was given 3 random points and 1 free point as a reward for the hunt, but he thought it was still a good reward. Then he decided to use the free points. Kai decided to increase his mana, which would become the basis for his powers in the future. As he left, Kai thought that many who had received the tower's blessing had 12 mana points, but Kai had 18. He had a good start, but suddenly he got distracted. Suddenly Kai called out to someone. He asked if they were looking at him, and the guy was asked how he knew about it. Then Kai replied that he attracted a lot of attention. The guy chuckled, saying that it was probably boring to look anywhere else. And then they thanked him for adding color to the routine work. Then the 6 was surprised that Kai managed to reach level 20. Kai replied that he was lucky, but the 6 thought that the people who said that were the most terrible. When asked the reason for the call, Kai replied that he needed a store. But the 6 was surprised when Kai said that he wanted to buy a skill, not an item. After opening the shop, the 6 said that Kai might be the first one to buy the skill in the second tutorial. At that moment, Kai thought that there were a lot of offers in the store. 6 said that there were skills that could be obtained in the tutorial, and when he asked if Kai was looking for something specific, the guy answered in the negative. Kai decided to buy monkey eyes, and the 6 was surprised when the purchase was justified by the cool name. Next, a sword was purchased, which the 6 approved of, but Kai found it annoying. After this, the 6 said goodbye to the guy. And great hopes were placed on Kai. He realized that he would be looked after as an object of special care. Kai thought that he had arrived here legally and had nothing to worry about, but he didn't know if they could find out about his return. The clock was created by Kronos, Mimir, and Odin, and for using the clock, Kronos' existence was erased, and the 6s were ordinary examiners and could not find a clue to come to the return. Kai's new skill, when activated, increased his field of view and enhanced his 5 senses. And even if someone found out about his return, Kai did not change his goal. As he walked forward, Kai thought that the real value of the eyes lay elsewhere. At that time, some worms ate people. Noticing the guy, they became wary. Using the new sword, Kai wanted to deal with the worms in the remaining half hour. Looking far ahead, Kai, as expected, came to the right place. Before Kai was the boss of the second tutorial. This was moders. And for Kai's minds, I invited us to wear malters. At resistis nahier, and it's heard they've Bibles for wisher mice. Soon, Kai dealt with the regular worms and was about to kill the boss. Kai thought that the boss didn't look like those monsters that ate people. The mother of worms had a strong attachment to her children, and an equally strong lack of brains, according to Kai. Having reached the guy, she tried to eat him. However, Kai jumped into the air, and then he was going to kill her instantly. Then he stabbed her in the head. With his other hand, Kai took hold of the axe, and he struck several blows along the body. The worm growled loudly in pain, and then Kai asked what they would do now. The choice fell on overturning his body, but Kai raised his axe and said that it was a bad choice. Then he launched several more attacks. However, he understood that this was not enough, although at that moment the worm's entire body was covered in cuts. But this was not enough for Kai, and he continued to attack. Eventually, he reached the worm's head. Then the worm tried to eat the guy again. But finally, Kai thanked her for coming first. After that, he dealt the fatal blow. At that moment, some people asked for the bullying to stop, but Will immediately shut those up. He told the guy that there was a limit to follow, and everyone agreed to choose the person to die. When Will was told that he had decided everything himself, he objected that they were the only ones who disagreed. Will forbade many from entering the safe zone, promising that he would kill them himself. At that moment, there were only 30 seconds left until the end. The worms have already set their sights on the people who have left the safe zone. But suddenly, Will was surprised. It turned out that time froze at 3 seconds. Next, he saw a notification that the safe zone would not shrink. To the 6's admiration for the victory, Kai said that he tried his best. 6 offered treatment, but Kai refused if it was as a reward. 6 was amazed that a normal person had gotten this far in the tutorial, and Kai said that he was making noise. 30 minutes ago, Kai killed the mother worm, who appeared later than he expected. The mother of worms supported the ecosystem of the second tutorial, and the reward for killing her was not determined. When Kai asked about the reward, the 6 admired that the guy understood the structure of this world, but Kai replied that it was strange not to know about it if he got so far. 6 replied that there were no more who didn't know, but Kai still insisted on a reward. Then the 6 finally agreed to issue the reward. He offered the guy to choose one of 3. Kai could proceed to the 5th tutorial and receive information and a reward for clearing the 3rd and 4th tutorials. Kai was a little angry that they just wanted to send him to the 5th tutorial as quickly as possible. The second reward to choose from was glasses, but Kai was interested in the latter. The third reward was a connection with Olympus. Kai was surprised, and the 6 said that the tutorial is the starting point of this world. He was told that the tower contained many authorities and beings possessing powers equal to those of the divine. Kai could be recommended to Olympus, which was one of the authorities in the tower, and if he got their support, Kai could be safe. But Kai did not realize that Olympus had great power in the tower. But Kai chose the second. But the 6 said that Kai had not yet used the glasses, so he was given a second chance. 6 tried to say that he needed to choose more carefully, but the guy didn't know anything about Olympus. Kai demanded that he do what he was told, since he had not coordinated this with the other sixes or the distributors. Then the six was afraid that Kai knew so much. But in the end, Kai thanked him because he understood what else he needed to do here. Kai then demanded a meeting with the distributor. Kai understood that the tutorial had to be separated from the tower, and he wouldn't get involved with Olympus, at least for the sake of a future goal. Suddenly, a glow appeared in front of him. When the distributor appeared, Kai introduced himself. The distributor asked if Kai had killed 1,000 dead in the first tutorial. The man said that he had already heard about the guy. Six was tense from their conversation, and in front of Kai stood the tutorial director. The man asked how Kai knew about his existence and the method of summoning. Kai replied that the first rule of the tutorial is that the participant must find out the information on his own without the tower's intervention. Kai said that he found out everything on his own, and the man himself could see whether the guy was lying or not. Kai's answer satisfied the man. Afterwards, Kai said that the interference was on their part. He said that Olympus was approaching the sixes, and Kai was offered Olympus's support as a reward. The six began to justify himself, but the manager became angry. The next moment, the man hit the floor. He was angry that now the Olympians were even reaching out here. Then he thanked Kai for helping him get rid of the rot. But Kai announced the second rule. Awards were given based on the participants' exceptionality. Kai used his points to summon the steward, who killed the six. He asked if the manager thought the same. The man replied that during the examination of the lower beings, no abnormalities or abilities were found. But this is precisely what surprised him. Then the man admitted that Kai had killed the six, although not with his own hands. He said that the six closest to the ranker died in the second tutorial. It happened because of just one member, and Kai decided to take it as a compliment. The man asked what would be suitable for Kai as a reward. Then he thought about a reward for Kai. Finally, Nick waited for the manager to come up with an idea. The man believed that such a reward should come in handy. He was about to shake hands with regret because he thought they would give him ordinary glasses. But then he was given the Mana Master skill. Mana and its recovery increased, as well as its resistance and induction. This surprised Kai, and the man asked if Kai liked this. Afterwards, he said goodbye, saying that it was necessary to teach the low creatures a lesson. The manager promised to see me when the third tutorial was over. After that, he left, leaving Kai alone. Kai was surprised that he was given such a skill in the tutorial. His skill was at 0, but he already had the skill to manage mana. Mana was the force that controlled everything in the tower. Mana concentration is the art of mana management of immense complexity. Seeing this skill, Kai was amazed. Mana was accumulating near his hands. And then, Kai used a new ability. He decided that the ability was still unstable, but not bad. But Kai understood that this was not enough, because he needed to do more than just regain his power before time was rewinded. He needed to get as high as possible. Sons. Kai had to become stronger to destroy the seemingly all-powerful outer gods. Meanwhile, the situation between people only became more tense. People tried to fight for their lives to avoid being driven out, but they grabbed him, saying that he was behaving in a stuffy manner. Will reminded him that he had asked for the next supply party to be assembled. He asked not to be upset because now many who could have died could survive. He demanded to move, but everyone looked into the distance. There was one man walking in the middle of the street. Everyone thought he was either brave or crazy, but suddenly he was warned of danger. A worm emerged from the ground and wanted to attack Kai, but the guy immediately fought back. At that moment, all the people were surprised. Will was surprised by this too, but Kai asked to ignore him and continue their conversation. In fact, Kai only came for the reward for completing it. At that time, the limit for people in the zone had not yet been exceeded. Will asked where Kai had been all this time. At that moment, Will said that he was worried about Kai's disappearance, but people began to whisper that the two were friends. Knives were pointed at people who had food in their hands. Will called Kai with him, but he had already noticed the situation here. Will was surprised that Kai immediately realized that those people had been forced to carry food. Will said they were just helping each other, but Kai wasn't happy with the fact that those people were risking their lives again. Kai thought this was a strange calculation, but then Will demanded to be heard. He told Kai that he had to become a coward to survive here. He said that in this world, there were no more moral standards and laws, and one had to become a cruel egoist. Will asked if Kai hadn't adjusted yet, but Kai only grinned at this. Then the second tutorial ended and people were given points and equipment, and Kai told Will to do it if that was his way of survival. He didn't want to participate in it or give advice. However, Kai warned against crossing the line. But Will didn't understand the meaning of his words, and he thought that Kai was bluffing. The third tutorial began, requiring players to collect 50 entities. 3 days were given for this, and after this time, the area would be destroyed. And in 70 hours, the gates were supposed to be activated. Everyone was surprised that there was no end to the monsters, but they understood that the safe zone was calm. Will was surprised that he had to kill monsters and collect essences. However, he believed that it was not necessarily he who should collect the entities. Meanwhile, Kai already had more than 100 entities, and the number of monsters in the area only increased. Kai wondered if he could raise more than 1,000. He then used his mana control skill and prepared for battle. Kai successfully collected the essences, but it was not enough for him. At that moment, the concentration of his mana was complete, and Kai prepared to attack. The next moment, everything around him began to collapse. Then he was surprised that everything worked out for him. All the mana was spent on concentration, and it was difficult to control, but in the future it would become a good skill. But now Kai did not despair. While gathering the essences, he reflected that concentrating mana was not his style. After this, the monsters began to be wary of the guy, and he asked them why they were trembling. After that, he decided to try again. Kai didn't want to waste the remaining time. On the second day of the third tutorial, some people were walking outside. People were talking about how in 2 days, out of 1,500 people, only 400 remained. Suddenly, Minka noticed something to the side. There was a 24-hour store at the station. Then they were happy that they would fill their inventory with food, and there would probably be ramen there. But Sam chuckled that there would be no ramen without boiling water. But Charlie thought that dry food would do just as well, and didn't notice the monster next to him. The next moment, the monster pounced on the guy, and horror was reflected on the faces of his friends. Following one monster, others appeared. Hostro. People grabbed their weapons and were worried that there were too many monsters. Minka began to wonder if they could win if they fought for survival and leveled up to 10. But the girl doubted their victory when a huge rat pounced on her. The next moment, the rat reached its prey, but the girl threw it away with her hand. Then the second rat bit her on the hand. Sam couldn't help her because he was trying to fight back himself. Then the zombie also bit the guy on the hand. At that moment, monsters were approaching from all sides. Minka couldn't believe it because she wanted to survive with all her might. But now, she was afraid that she would die here senselessly. Suddenly, the rat next to her was killed. The girl was surprised when the monster's blood got on her, and the monsters stopped attacking and began to be afraid. Then an angry Kai appeared who had been sleeping, but they woke him up. Then the girl was surprised by the stranger's strength. After all, she saw how the guy was able to kill the monster with just one can. The next moment, Kai used the same action. He threw a can at the monster, and then he hit his target again. And then he prepared to fight with conventional weapons. Making a dash, the guy killed several monsters, one after another, and he kicked the spider with all his might. The spider was mortally wounded and was the last monster at that time. Afterwards, Kai straightened up and looked at the strangers. After a short silence, they thanked Kai for saving them. But the next moment, Sam fell to the floor. Then Kai gave them some medicine and asked how much stamina they had, and Sam replied that he had about 17 points of stamina. But he became scared when he heard that he wouldn't die from the bite, but there was a chance that he wouldn't be able to use his hand. In a panic, they hastily tried to use the medicine. Kai was thinking at that moment that he had slept for about 6 hours, but he would have liked more. In fact, he went to bed for the first time in 3 days and was very tired. In order to rest, he even bought a powder that hid the smell from monsters. But Kai didn't expect other obstacles to arise. Kai decided to leave, and Minka asked if he hunted here all the time. Minka said that more dangerous monsters could be found here than on the surface. But Kai replied that he was not here all the time, and that there was a cafe and a place to relax. He added that he had other hunting grounds. Afterwards, he led them to a 2-story dungeon, which really did look like a hunting ground. When Kai asked why they came to such a dangerous place, the girl replied that Kai did not know what was happening on the surface because he was always below. It turned out that up there, everyone was killing each other because of the battle for the entities, and there was complete chaos. Kai assumed they were under attack, so they went down, and he was right. But Kai noticed that they almost died below. Sam wanted to say that they survived thanks to Kai, but suddenly they heard a roar. Sam and Minka tensed, wondering what that sound was. But Kai asked them if there was a guarantee that he would not kill them and take the essences. At that moment, they realized that they hadn't asked such a question because Kai had already saved them. But Kai was much more dangerous than monsters or people because of his strength. When Kai was told that he had to collect enough essences, the boy asked what if he could collect as many as possible. Kai said that even if he doesn't kill them, someone else will. But Minka thought it was strange that Kai would say something like that if he wanted to harm them. Then she asked what Kai wanted from them. After that, Kai chuckled a little. He had a proposal for Sam and Minka, and if they did well, then the entities could be divided. Naturally, Kai's idea included monsters. The huge monster was soon chasing after Sam, who was already doubting whether this was a good offer. Before this, Kai asked the guy if he had hurt his leg. Sam's legs were fine, and that satisfied Kai. After all Sam had to do was run. So soon, Sam was running from the monster, screaming for help. At the right moment, Kai attacked the huge snake, and he attacked her in the open mouth. Immediately after, he headed towards another huge monster, and then he cut him several times. Kai's attack was so powerful that the monster immediately split into pieces. At that moment, Sam was surprised by the speed of Kai's attack. The guy wondered how many entities Kai could have collected if he killed so quickly. And because of the high level of the monster, several essences dropped. While collecting the entities, Will thought that in 2 hours they had collected 50 entities. At that moment, Kai also decided to take several entities for himself. The guy was also covered in the monster's blood. Looking at Kai, Will thought he was a bird of a different feather. When Kai asked how many entities there were, Will was confused. Will said there were 6 in total, and Kai said there was one thing, Will's, and he had to take care of it. As he handed over the essences, Will thought that the speed at which the monsters were arriving was not keeping up with the speed of the hunt, and Will did not understand why Kai needed so many essences. Afterwards, Will noticed that Minka was late, but Kai replied that she would get there slowly. Suddenly, Kai was asked what his level was. Will said that with such a speed of hunting, the level must be serious, and Kai replied that gradually it stops increasing. But Will was afraid that Kai's level was now hardly rising. Kai said that level and stats are personal information that should not be asked or answered. Will noted that Kai had recently asked him about stamina, but Kai had wondered if it would be better to let his arm rot. Finally, Kai advised hunting monsters occasionally to level up. At that moment, Minka finally appeared, leading a bunch of monsters. Will was afraid that they hadn't had time to really rest, and Kai immediately rushed to attack. Soon, Sam also began to participate in the fight. Having killed the monster, he was surprised that he had managed to do it. Minka asked if Sam had leveled up like she had. They soon dealt with the monsters and met with Kai. Will asked if they could take the essences for themselves, and Kai didn't mind since they managed to kill the monsters themselves. After giving Minka the essence, Kai said that they now had 50 of them each. Minka said that she had 20 before and she didn't expect to collect the required amount so quickly. Kai also thanked them for their help in the hunt. At that moment, there were just under 3 hours left until the end. The gate was supposed to activate soon, so Kai told them to get up, and Sam and Minka were happy about this. When Minka asked if it was still chaos, Sam replied that it wasn't going to get any better. The guy said the people outside were annoying. When the gates began to turn scarlet, people realized that they would soon open. But then, everyone hid knives behind their backs and chatted as if nothing was happening. Everyone thought it was easier to kill a person and take away the essences. People's thinking was the same. One man wanted to quickly take the essences from someone when the gates opened. But suddenly he was asked if the leader of that side had looked at them. It turned out that Will was walking in their direction. This made them scared. Will said they hadn't seen each other for a long time, but they told him they weren't on the same page as each other. Grinning at their pride, Will said they knew what was coming. Will said that when the gates open, it will rain blood. Then everyone realized that Will had created the gang for this moment. He was asked how much he was missing, but Will replied that they had more mouths to feed. The man was surprised when he heard that they needed 700. This was an absurd demand, because even if they combined their essences, they would only have 300. Will asked to give at least 400, and then they would retreat. However, this only escalated the conflict. If you refuse Will's offer, a massacre will begin because 20 people cannot cope with 50. While they were pondering what to do, someone broke through the crowd. Suddenly, the man was surprised. Everyone saw Kai carrying something in a box. When Will asked where he had been, Kai replied that he obviously had things to do. And when asked if he had collected all the entities, Kai answered that, yes. Then everyone was surprised by the number of entities Kai had. There were a huge number of them in the box. Everyone assumed that Kai had more than 1,000 of them. Will didn't understand how Kai had managed to collect so much, but he was counting on the people behind him. There were at least 50 of them. Will thought that Kai would never be able to handle that many people, but Will was surprised when Kai asked him to look under his feet. There was a line drawn on the ground. Kai replied that he had an overabundance of entities. Everyone started asking for essence, but Kai replied that it wasn't free. He demanded 100 points apiece, and he allowed only those who intended to buy to enter the circle. But people thought it was robbery. Everyone understood that the entities were not for sale, and they could only be taken from a person. Will called Kai selfish for making such a deal. He asked what if people have nothing to pay with. But Kai remained steadfast. He replied that the question was strange because he did not force anyone to buy. Kai said that anyone could buy, but there was no deferred sale, and he also accepted an item or skill. Then everyone was surprised that the item could be sold, but this only made Will angry. People could turn their backs on him. Then he said that Kai killed someone and took the essences, and now he wanted to sell them. But Minka decided to stand up for Kai because Will was not the kind of person who could say such things. Minka said that he killed their friend, and Sam replied that based on Will's words, they should have died too. Sam said they knew absolutely nothing about Kai, but Will only got angry and said that the three of them couldn't do anything. He wanted to show that it wouldn't be safe with Kai, and then he ordered all three to be killed. Then everyone rushed towards Kai. But the guy immediately killed those who crossed the line. And at that moment, Kai decided to remind that the line cannot be crossed. Will was horrified by the boy's cruelty. The others were also scared after the murder of their comrades. Then Will understood the meaning of Kai's phrase back then. Kai said the terms of the deal don't change, but crossing the line for anything other than the purpose of purchase is prohibited. Kai said that if the conditions were violated, people would die. But Will only ordered his men to kill the guy. But Kai was stronger than them all. He dealt with every man Will sent, and every person who crossed the line died. Will was terrified by the boy's strength. Then he thought with horror that only Will had forgotten what this world had become. Suddenly, he decided that he had to run and stepped back. Will thought about what Kai had said, that he would only kill if the line was crossed. But Kai decided to get to Will too. He replied that he saw the guy's face. At the last moment, Will couldn't understand anything, and his head flew off his shoulders. A bloody mess formed around Kai, but he was able to kill everyone. He was unhappy with the mess and decided to move the box. The Luis were tense as Kai approached them, and each of them avoided Kai. The man was horrified by the brutal murder of the boy because his personal power triumphed over the collective. He thought that he had already adapted to this world, but when he saw Kai, he realized that he was wrong. At that moment, he decided to buy the essence from Kai. When asked where he would get the points, the man replied that the weapon could be sold for 500 points. The man said that the guy obtained all the entities through his own hunting. After all, it was clear that Kai could not become so strong by killing a couple of monsters, and he did not take the essences of the killed people. This proved that he had not stolen the essence and would stick to a fair deal. Noticing someone approaching, Kai turned around. Approaching Kai, the man extended his hand. He asked the guy for 7 pieces. The laws and rules of the world were created by people like Kai. Then everyone decided that they could simply buy the entities and move on to the next stage. While everyone was deciding on the purchase, the first man walked through the portal. At that moment, everyone suddenly went to Kai. Also, everyone wanted to sell their damaged weapons. However, the sixes refused to pay a large sum for the weapon. Some sold skills for points. But Kai knew the deal wasn't a good one. He thought that maybe it was better than dying now, but he knew that he couldn't lose his skills. But everything worked out well for him. He had more than 150,000 points. At that moment, Minka noticed that Kai wanted to leave. When he asked why they hadn't left, Minka replied that they were waiting for him. After Kai refused, Sam said that he could use them again as bait. Hearing this, Kai hesitated. Then he said that, unfortunately, that was all. Kai told them not to rely on anyone and added that he would not go any further. The next moment, Minka and Sam were surprised. Kai has no essence left. Because of this, the guy and the girl were upset. Sam panicked and said that Kai should have kept some for himself too. But Kai told them to move quickly because chaos would soon begin here. But Minka and Sam were upset about this. Then Sam decided to call the girl to follow him. After this, our heroes went their separate ways. Kai knew the next tutorial was defense. At that moment, a man ran up to him and asked if Kai had sold all the entities. And the man was horrified to hear that the trade was over. Then he collapsed to the ground. This place was soon to become the site of a battle for essences. And Kai decided to change the scenery. Then he decided to use the store. But what happened next was not what he expected. However, Kai still remained calm. The tutorial manager appeared in front of him, and then the man asked if the guy had called him. Kai replied that he had called, but not him, and it turned out that the staff had been reduced. It turned out that the connection was 1 in 3. And many of the 6s were here for a long time because of Kai, so the movement slowed down. When asked why it was his fault, the man explained that more than 100 people used the store. But Kai asked if it was really that bad, if the manager had come in person to use the store. However, Kai was the object of special treatment. The man said that Kai's power could have collapsed the tutorial's ecosystem, but that was what Kai was after. Having said that this was exactly what he was heading towards, the guy wanted to use the store again. Then the man said that it was the first time he had met someone like Kai. Afterwards, he decided to fulfill the player's will, and a store opened in front of Kai. Kai decided to take the average personal inventory, and then the Ice Jade Steel Sword. As a result, Kai purchased equipment that would be useful at a higher level of the tower. Finally, Kai asked for one well-forged sword. The master said that the last sword was basic, but Kai was satisfied. Afterwards, the man said that now no one would be able to touch Kai. However, Kai heard that this only applied to the members. Having said that he was looking forward to it, the manager left. And after he left, Kai hissed in displeasure. Then he raised his head. The zone began to collapse, and Kai saw the sky, which he had not seen for a very long time. Kai was safe because his clothes were resistant to magic and fire. Kai first decided to protect his body from the heating air. Suddenly, Kai heard someone screaming. Moving in that direction, he assumed that there were 3 people left, and Kai was right. But seeing the guy, the man asked why he was here. He was very surprised that Kai did not go further. At that moment, the earth began to collapse, and then the area in front of Kai was covered in fire, and people's screams were heard. Burning alive, they asked for help. At that moment, Kai became wary, and all the streets started to burn. Skeletons emerged from the ground, and fire also emanated from them. These were low-level demons called skulls. Taking the equipment, Kai thought that there were too many monsters. However, they were not Kai's opponents. He needed the one who made this event called Destruction. The conversation was about the lesser demon Surtra. Kai took aim at this demon, and he behaved calmly in front of the enemy. Kai recalled that during Ragnarok his size was the size of a mountain, but now Surtra was the size of a large house. At that moment, Surtra was glad that another world would be swallowed by the tower, but Kai decided to interrupt the demon's speech, saying that he was talking too much for a child who was 176th in a row. But Kai reminded the demon of another guy. Surprised that Kai had the same eyes, Surtra leaned towards him. Having created a throne for himself, Surtra asked if Kai could also get out of this place. Afterwards, Kai began to fight monsters. With one swing of his sword, he split their skulls. However, this caused an explosion. Surtra was surprised by the boy's strength. He noticed that the guy was wearing unusual clothes and asked if Kai wanted to fight back. The guy chuckled and said it was a smart investment. However, Kai said that he didn't want to fight back. He wanted to hunt. Well, Surtra said that Kai would repeat the cheeky words when he got to him. Kai replied rudely that he already realized that Surtra had a heavy backside to lift, and Kai also thought that there were too many words. After that, he rushed into attack. By killing strong monsters, Kai's level rose again. However, the guy was constantly faced with explosions, and the whole street was even more engulfed in flames. Because of this, Kai's shield began to break a little, but Kai continued to fight. At some point, increasing your level also gave you stats. Kai then thought that he was wearing special clothing, but he felt stuffy after absorbing the heat for 2 hours. The force of the skull explosions was small, but Kai couldn't dodge them, so he took them with his whole body. But Kai didn't want to use mana concentration because it was expensive and not suitable for a long fight. Realizing it was time to finish, Kai told Surtra to come down. Then Kai heard from Surtra that the things were incredible and it was unclear how Kai got them in the tutorial. Then he went down to Kai. Kai replied that Surtra was causing chaos on the territory of the tutorial and had no conscience. Surtra replied that he had exterminated those who had no right, but he believed that Kai could rise high in the tower. When asked why Kai was here, the guy again answered that he was hunting. Surtra asked if Kai would really kill him, and he decided to fight back against the guy. Then Kai had to defend himself. Knowing that his body had absorbed enough heat, Kai thought he could handle it, and he was able to withstand the blow of the sword. But the method of obtaining the eyes was unusual, according to Kai's ally. And for their sake, Kai now needed to win. Surtra was calm at that moment. And it turned out that in place of Kai, there were only fragments. After Surtra, I recovered a bit. It seemed to him that Kai had deliberately exposed himself to the blow. But suddenly heat began to emanate from that place. And then Kai crawled out from under the rubble. He admitted that he thought he would die. And after that, the battle had to continue again. And according to Wind, the first way to win was an ability that used lightning to reach the other end of the universe. And the second way is unlimited mana. And at that moment, Kai was able to obtain fiery eyes. Surtra also noticed the eyes, with which Kai could now distinguish between good and evil. Afterwards, Kai decided to take other subjects. And after this, preparations for the hunt were completed. But Surtra asked what Kai would do in such a state. After absorbing the ice crystal, Kai said it was nothing. Surtra was surprised, and Kai's temperature gradually dropped. The temperature dropped, but Kai was even freezing. Afterwards, Surtra swung his fiery sword, and he hit Kai, who now had the opposite energy, cold. Then there was an explosion. However, it was difficult for Kai to withstand this pressure, but Surtra was surprised by the boy's strength. And after that, Kai even managed to throw away the enemy's sword. Then he went on the offensive, and he attacked Surtra. This made the demon a little angry, and Kai decided that he should hit harder. However, Surtra was about to strike as well. Then Kai realized that he would have to dodge. And after Surt attacked Kai. However, the guy managed to defend himself from the blow, and immediately Kai began to absorb more ice crystals. And Surtra wanted to attack again. Knowing that Kai wouldn't be able to withstand the cold for long, he wanted to finish. And the next moment, he dodged the attack. While attacking, Kai decided that there was no longer any point in conserving mana. But Surtur was only angered by the boy's actions. At the same moment, Kai used mana concentration, and he struck Surtur. That blow almost took his head off. And then Kai decided to deliver the final blow. He climbed up to Surtur's neck. As Kai prepared to strike, Surtra asked how he dared to behave like that. Afterwards, Surtra began to emit more heat. Because of this, Kai began to get burns. But at such a moment, Kai had no intention of retreating. Determined to win, Kai readied his sword to strike. At the last moment, Surtra asked the guy to stop. But it was already too late, and the guy's sword was too damaged. However, at such a price, the destruction of the tutorial was defeated. Kai's level was raised, but he didn't believe that he had actually killed the demon. But he understood that this was only the beginning. He said with a grin that the road was quite bumpy. After some time, Kai woke up. When he stood up, he felt pain in his body. He decided that he hadn't slept much since the burns were still on his hands. Kai understood that it was no joke for his body that there was still cold in it. Kai thought he was going to die, but now he was in the intermediate stage to golden fiery eyes. But he decided to continue moving towards his goal and not waste time. He thought that after the flame disappeared, Surtur was not so scary. However, all byproducts of the demon's body are objects. Then Kai finally got what he was looking for. Before him was the heart of a giant. Kai wanted to absorb the heart immediately, but with his current body it would be difficult since he had little stamina. Suddenly, Kai heard the manager. The man asked with displeasure if Kai had finished. When asked if the manager had come again, the man said that he was the one who should speak like that, and then he said that the level balance was lost, and he was scolded because of Kai. The man did not understand where the one who was causing so many problems came from. It turned out that the 4th tutorial was almost finished, and Kai asked how much time was left, but Kai said that 4 hours was enough for him. After shaking hands, the man said he had spent a lot of time discussing the award. Kai was surprised when he received the award. Kai was surprised that he was not aware of all the satisfactory skills. But Kai immediately realized that the skill compensated for the stat deficiencies. At the end, Kai asked the man for a small pill, and then the manager gave a pill that increased mana and endurance. Afterwards, the manager left. Finally, he told Kai to rest after taking the pill. Then Kai sat down on the ground, and he decided to restore his strength in 4 hours. Kai already knew that the 5th tutorial was a race. Kai woke up from some noise. Then he realized that there was a beginning, and then he was teleported to the 5th tutorial. Kai found himself outside the city, and there were many people in front of him. People believed that they were somewhere near the sea. Kai knew that this stage was made up of players from different worlds. The start of the final tutorial was announced, and some were glad that it was the end. The island was slowly sinking into the sea, and the players needed to escape from it. But before that, it was necessary to kill the boss at the top. There were 30 days to do everything. But everyone was surprised that a whole month was given. Kai understood that under such conditions, there was no need to immediately take up arms. But he understood that he was given a month to fight the boss. That was exactly how much time he was given. And Kai guessed that some people understood this. Then the first proposal to create a team appeared, and many agreed with this. But one guy said that he would choose an ally for himself whom he could trust. But Kai recognized that guy. Some were outraged by the words that they could not become allies for him. However, the stranger was calm. In one moment, he killed all the people. The other participants were surprised by his strength, and it didn't take much effort for the guy to fight them. Hargan was the self-proclaimed heir to Olympus. Everyone was amazed at his skill. Kai thought his strength in the 5th tutorial was worthy of the tower's attention. Purebloods grew up in the tower and absorbed its secrets, and after their choice, they began to climb the tower and could not help but differ in level from the others. And the person in the past who made a big contribution to the 5th tutorial was Hargan. But Kai had no reason to get involved with the guy, so he decided to leave. But suddenly, he was called out. Hargan turned his attention to the Kai, but Kai didn't notice when Hargan approached him, and Hargan asked what Kai was like. He asked if these clothes weren't the robes of the fiery spell. Hargan asked where Kai got an item that wasn't available in the tutorial. Kai answered honestly that he bought it, but Hargan was surprised by this. Hargan asked about the level, but Kai replied that it was in rude gesture. And Hargan was surprised that the boy had even grasped this. Karagan suggested creating a team, but Kai refused. This left the blonde dumbfounded. Hargan said that Kai simply didn't know who he was, but Kai wasn't interested. Such impudence outraged the blonde, and then he chased after Kai. But on the way, he met a monster. That monster didn't cause any trouble for Harrigan, but it turned out that this was not the first monster killed. And Hargan didn't understand how Kai could be so fast. Hargan even suggested that Kai was a pureblood. He kept thinking about whose relative Kai might be. Then the guy thought that it seemed like it would be boring, but now it became interesting. Kai was in a tree at the time. At that moment, he realized that he had come loose. He thought that speed was not Hargan's strength, but he used Herculean strength. Afterwards, Kai came down. He realized that the manager was not only talking to him when the conversation turned to balance, but Kai thought it didn't concern him. In the cave, Kai fought with a monster. He dealt powerful blows to the monster. Gradually, Kai continued to level up. Kai noticed that he had killed a dozen monsters, but his Heaven's Fate skill had not risen. But he decided to cover up the smell and did not come for the sake of hunting. By then, the guy's body had already recovered sufficiently. Everything was ready, and he used the inventory. And then he took out the giant's heart. The guy sat down on the ground and was about to swallow it. He remembered the advice that the heart needed to be absorbed before the end of the tutorial. Instantly, changes began to occur in his body. The blood of the giant and the demon penetrated his body. A battle between man and demon began within his body, and Kai felt a strong heat. The fire was inside the body, so the equipment did not help the guy. Kai felt like his whole body was being turned inside out. Kai could only endure the pain that he could not drown out. Hercules said that to absorb the heart, fiery eyes were needed, and if Kai could not get them, then the heart would also have to be given up. But Kai had one chance at this. At one point, his powers began to increase. He thought that little by little it should get better. When the conditions were met, Kai received a giant fire, but Kai didn't understand what it was because the necessary skill didn't appear. Then Kai's strength left him. Falling to the ground, Kai saw the time counter. He noticed that the first quarter of the day had passed. Everything swam before his eyes, and Kai wondered if he had done something wrong. However, even when the conditions were met, the skill did not appear. Kai wondered if he should calm down. Then a notice of satisfaction of the demands appeared, and the pure blood of the giant and the demon were absorbed. At that moment, Kai realized that he had succeeded. After receiving gigantization, Kai passed out. Kai had been out for a quarter of a day and realized that there were already difficulties in the tutorial. But Kai had to hurry because someone cleared this tutorial in a week, and Odin played the main role in this. Kai didn't want to lose this one. After checking the rankings, Kai saw that Hargan was in first place. Also in the ranking were a brother and sister from a world where magic was developed. Kai hadn't heard of the person in second place, but the person in fourth place must be from the same world as Kai. But Kai didn't remember him, which meant everyone died here. But he understood that thinking about it wouldn't change anything and decided to go. Coming out of the cave, Kai already had the skill to attack, and Kai decided to decide where to go. Then he used his eyes, and he found an orc settlement in the forest. When he appeared before the monsters, they mistook the man for prey. But Kai wanted to test the new ability. Then the entire settlement was covered in fire. All the orcs were afraid that a man was doing this. But Kai immediately took up his sword and immediately began to attack. Kai remained calm, however, and he realized that he had 6 days left. Hargan soon noticed that Kai was in second place in the rankings. He chuckled, thinking that Kai only had fast legs, but it turned out that was not the case. Someone noticed that Hargan was happy about something, and he replied that he wanted to bring someone. Steph immediately guessed that they were talking about Kai, with whom they were from the same world. When asked if Steph knew him, the guy replied that they were from the same country. But to prevent Kai from overtaking Hargan, he assembled a team. Hargan thought he had assembled a good team, but one spot was empty, and then he decided to start hunting. Someone suddenly found something. Paladinti immediately reported this to Hargan. Hargan praised the guy and decided to take a closer look at everything. Hargan asked everyone not to get caught in the attack, and then he prepared to strike. Then a lot of debris rose into the air. Steph asked if the place they were looking for was here, and then Hargan asked everyone to go inside. Everyone thought it looked like a cave. But Paladint wanted to look around first, and only then move. But Hargan noticed that something was wrong and did not move. He didn't understand why there was no message about the dungeon being discovered. He guessed that they were not the first ones here. Suddenly, everyone asked Harrigan to check the rank. And then Hargan saw that Kai was in first place. After that, he continued to kill monsters. Everyone realized that Hargan was angry. Elidor suggested that Hargan felt competitive. But someone said that at this rate, there would be no good hunting. Then Yolche decided to split the team. Hagen said there was a fork ahead and agreed to split up. Yolche, Steph, Elidor, Palin, Typhoon walked to the right, and Yolche agreed to command her squad. She said that they would see each other later. Soon, Yolche's squad began to fight. Everyone fought in different zones. Yolche managed to attack monsters with his eyes closed, and soon they sorted everything out. Everyone agreed that after 2 hours, the hunt began to get boring, but everyone was interested in the huge door. Steph said he'd seen things like these in his world, and usually there were bosses there. But Yolche said not to relax because they were not finished yet, and Steph agreed with this. But the next moment he felt something was wrong. When asked what was wrong, the guy started talking about the rating. And then there was a noise in the area. Everyone realized that the sound was coming from behind the door. Steph thought that the recent shock and the first place score were connected. Then they entered the boss's room, which was empty. Everyone saw that the cleanup was complete. Steph immediately understood what was going on. He saw Kai's glasses grow. Now, Kai was in first place with more than 10,000 points. No one suspected that Kai would clear the boss faster. Before that, he continued to kill monsters and dealt with the strongest. But Kai didn't like that the monsters were so tenacious. Kai tried to learn how to use skills and mana wisely. For clearing the boss, the guy received 3,000 points. Kai decided that he should mostly kill bosses. He didn't understand what effect the skill had, and he knew that he needed to increase the completion. Kai told those who arrived that they were a little late. Then everyone was surprised that Kai managed it alone. Hargan was recognized as the strongest, but Kai killed the boss single-handedly. Steph couldn't believe that such skills were possessed by a man he shared a world with. When Steph asked if Kai had companions, the guy replied that he was alone. Realizing that Kai was dangerous if he wasn't on their team, Steph offered to join them. Kai immediately recognized that same Steph, but he refrained from answering. Kai immediately guessed that it was Hargan's team, which had split up to hunt. And Kai realized that the stranger was Yolcho. Thinking that such a team was good, Kai was in no hurry to answer. And finally, he decided to give up. Steph wasn't surprised, and Yolcha asked if he was going to take down the other boss as well. She said that there would be no problems even if the boss was killed by the majority forces. The girl was getting at the point that the essence of this tutorial is teamwork. Kai listened to her, but was in no hurry to answer. He wanted to say something, but there was a crash. Elidor said she would contact the captain, but Steph replied that it would only make things noisier. The next moment, Hargan himself arrived, and in a rage he attacked Kai. As he approached, he swung. But Kai stopped the guy with his hand, and then he put Hargan head down. This made the entire Hargan team tense. And then Kai asked if they wanted to survive or become a ranker. But Yolche was tensed that Kai knew about the rankers. A ranker is a person who has been able to pass through all the floors and has the power to enjoy power, strength, or eternal life. Kai calmly replied that he was not interested in such a thing. But the girl was offended, because for many, becoming a ranker is just a dream. She asked if Kai was going to become a top ranker, but he replied that he would rise above it. Kai admitted that he wanted to break through the ceiling of the tower. Everyone thought it was absurd, and then Hargan spoke again. He was indignant and said that the blow was painful. Kai replied that he thought Hargan was attacking him, but the blonde only wanted to grab him. Hargan fell silent when he heard the words that when a strong man is rushing at you, all you can do is get scared. After this, Hargan apologized, and his comrades were indignant that he was convinced by Kai's words. Afterwards, Hargan praised Kai's speech. The blonde said that Kai didn't know his father, but Kai didn't understand why he didn't know the king of Olympus, Zeus. Afterwards, Kai began to listen to disagreements within the team. But Hargan said that someday he would become stronger and be the king of Olympus. Everyone was surprised by the guy's speech. Kai thought that Hargan had great ambitions. Hargan offered to bet on who could kill the boss faster and said that Kai could create a team at his own discretion, but Hargan would only have 9 people. Kai thought this was amazing, because Hargan was going to operate with a small team, and if they lost, Kai would join them. And if Kai wins, Hargan promised to treat him like an older brother. But Hargan only saw a smirk at this. Kai asked what was good about having such a younger brother. Kai said it was better to let Hargan provide assistance when needed. Hargan also promised to give up his item if needed, but Kai replied that they would sort it out later. And Hargan was glad that the bet was concluded. Hargan asked him not to disappear for a long time, and Kai thought that at every meeting they had, energy was pouring out of him. Returning to the team, Hargan asked everyone to hurry, but suddenly they heard that there was no point in counting seconds or acting in haste. It turned out that time had stopped. Hargan asked why this happened. Kai replied that Varaganda was not an island, but a sacred animal. And the monsters here were parasites that took the strength from the beast. Because of them, Varaganda wanted to dive underwater to kill the monsters. And Hargan realized that the main monster was like a parasite king. The blonde didn't understand whether he should trust Kai if he knew something that Olympus didn't know. And now Kai was saying that the time limit wasn't working. The gist of the 5th tutorial was how much time would be left and how many bosses would be killed. But in reality, Odin didn't kill the boss in a week. He had to stop time. Kai had to take advantage of the moment to strengthen himself before time ran out. When time stopped, all the people were surprised, but everyone decided that they needed to score points during this time. Meanwhile, the Sixes were panicking because one boss was killed. The Six wanted to contact the manager, even though he was busy with matters with Olympus. Everyone tried to use the time to improve and kill strong monsters. Kai was able to kill the huge orc. The other orcs were afraid when their leader was defeated. Everyone called the guy a monster, but Kai asked how they could call someone a monster to their face. After this, all the orcs ran away in fear. At that moment, Kai noticed that time began to pass again. And although it is unlikely that he will be able to stop time again, Kai has already won himself 3 days. Then he decided to walk slowly. He needed to come to the tower where the gods lived. Soon, explosions occurred at the top of the mountain. A crater formed at the very top. Steph noticed that many people had come, and Elidor said that only those who had at least some skills would participate. Then Steph thought about it. He thought that many were above level 20. When asked if all players could manage mana, Yolche replied that the players did. The girl also said that there were people like her or Kargon who were chosen to climb the tower, but Yolche couldn't say that they would defeat the boss. But she couldn't even imagine how strong Hargan was. As he approached, the guy said that they were late because they wanted to make the most of the time. Steph asked if Kai had arrived, and Elidor noticed the guy. Kai walked towards everyone else. At that moment, the guy decided to find out how much everyone had leveled up. Steph and Elidor had different mana flows. Apparently, they had leveled up, just like Hargan. Mercenary, After greeting him, Hargan asked if Kai would kill the monster alone. Kai replied that there would be more points then, but Hargan thought he was crazy. Meanwhile, their difference in points was 7,000. Suddenly, someone approached Kai and offered to join the team. But suddenly, Hargan pushed everyone away from Kai. It angered him that the pathetic midges were inviting Kai to their place. Everyone was scared, thinking that Kai was on Hargan's team, but Kai was only happy because he was irritated by the attention. As he left, Kai wished him luck, as time was precious in the tutorial. Hargan just chuckled that Kai wanted to complete the tutorial in 5 days. Kai ignored the subsequent offer to go together, and then he went down. Instantly, a multitude of monsters appeared. Other players followed suit and also encountered the monster. They were surprised by the number of monsters, and Kai knew that there were several points that needed to be cleared before meeting the boss. Monsters were gathered here that couldn't even coexist. Afterwards, Kai prepared his weapon. Knowing where the boss was, Kai decided to break through as quickly as possible. Then everyone thought that they would finally see Kai in action. Hargan also wanted to watch closely. He decided to give Kai a try once. The next moment, everyone lost sight of Kai. Everyone was surprised by this, but at that moment, Kai was above the monsters. Steph was surprised, not understanding what it was. And then Kai dropped to the ground, striking. Then everyone realized that he was a monster who was worse than the captain. This instantly made Hargan become serious. Steph covered his mouth, startled, but Hargan said he knew it. Not wanting to lose, he rushed forward. Hargan destroyed all the spears that flew at him, but suddenly they decided to attack him from above. However, that attack was dispelled by Kai. At that moment, everyone else decided to join in too. As they walked through the traps, Steph said that there was nothing for them to do here. Elidor and Paladinte also entered the battle. They told Steph to push through. Then Steph used his mana concentration skill and told everyone to duck. His attack was close to Kai. Kai noticed that the others didn't interfere, and thanks to their skills, they wouldn't die in what happened next. But Hargan ran to some door, and he looked at her thoughtfully. He thought that the picture before him was strange. When asked if this was a war, Kai replied that it was possible, since he himself had seen this picture for the first time. But Kai knew that the one he was looking for was behind the door. Then Hargan was indignant that Kai was leaving silently again, but Kai replied that he had wanted to be alone from the very beginning. Then the blonde said that they had already been together, and Kai would not lose anything because of it. But at that moment, he heard someone's roar. Everyone was scared and said that their bodies went numb from just screaming. Hargan guessed what kind of boss there would be and invited his people to enter. However, then he asked everyone to move away a little, and they saw a huge monster chained in chains. The monster looked like a reptile. It turned out that there was a chimera in front of them. Hargan said the tutorial was supposed to end after this boss, but Kai didn't answer him. It turned out that only one person could subdue the chimera and the tutorial would still be completed, and the owner of the chimera could receive additional points. Elidor said that it was a test in which, while killing the chimera, it was necessary to protect the seal stone from people. But Yolche said that keeping track of 9 people is not difficult. But there was only one man who was faster than Hargan. Hargan tried to stop Kai, but he told him to let him go. Hargan reminded him of the terms of the bet, but Kai replied that he would win the bet and finish the tutorial as well. Then Hargan asked why Kai needed this. Kai replied that he knew how Karag would behave, and that was why he wanted to do everything himself. And then Kai took out his sword, and then he broke the seal stone. At that moment, Kai became the owner of the chimera, and then the chimera growled loudly. Hargan asked if Kai knew exactly what he was doing, but Kai told the chimera to destroy the wall. The chimera immediately began to carry out the order. Everyone was surprised by this. Kai then said that the chimera would not attack them while he controlled it. They had another enemy. Kai explained that the chimera was created by combining different monsters, but someone had to create it. Hargan didn't understand who the real boss was, and Kai said that it was everyone's choice to go with him or not. Afterwards, he moved forward with the chimera. In the end, Hargan decided to go after Kai. Because of this, they ended up in a strange cave. Many were horrified by what they saw, but Hargan didn't like that the passage was so long. But Kai knew that that room had not been announced in advance, and Kai knew exactly where the main boss was. Afterwards, he entered the room with the 4th boss. Kai asked if it was an afternoon nap, and that man was the creator of the chimera. Chimera tensed up when she saw her creator. Then the creator said that this was the first time that the chimera's right of trust had been used in this way. The man found this amusing. He also noticed that there was Zeus's blood next to Kai. Hargan was angered by the words that he was a half-breed. To Hargan's questions, Kai replied that it was the black magician, Child. Hargan was surprised that Child was an examiner on the 50th floor who used players for experiments. Kai reassured him that Child had shamefully lost to the player and had now almost lost his strength. Child was sentenced to create bosses for 1,000 years, but never regained his power. When asked how he knew so much, Kai pointed to himself and asked if he remembered this. Child was surprised when he saw the boy's eyes, and then he attacked in rage. Hanger was surprised by Child's strength, but Kai said that if he had not lost his strength, they would have died. Child asked where Kai got such eyes from. Kai replied that Child should not speak in such an offended tone, but Child demanded to answer the questions. As the monsters approached, Kai said that he did not come to satisfy curiosity. Kai said that he could not let such a worm live. When the monsters approached, no one understood what was happening, but Hargan said to sweep them all away. After that, the battle began. Everyone tried to fight back, and eventually, the place became a slaughterhouse. Everyone thought that these chimeras could be feared, but they were not yet finished. And Kai was able to act because the others were fighting. But suddenly, he noticed something. A coffin formed, trapping the boy inside. Child said that the coffin was absolutely strong, and even the chimeras couldn't get out of it. Child didn't want to let Kai live or die, but suddenly the coffin cracked, and then it broke down completely. Kai's strength was insane. Child couldn't believe it when he saw the boy's hand. Looking at Kai, he thought that the guy was connected to Olympus. Hercules surpassed everyone in strength and punished evil while possessing boundless kindness towards the weak. This was the hero Kai revered most of all, and now he himself resembled Hercules. It was expected that the strength limit was only for one arm, but for now, that was enough for Kai. Child replied that he would listen to the answer after he tore off the guy's legs and arms. But Kai told him to shut up, and then he prepared to strike. However, Child used a triple reinforced coffin. This didn't stop the guy. Kai was able to break through the coffin. Child told Kai not to die yet because he wanted to hear a lot. He then launched a poisonous attack at Kai. Kai was told that if he couldn't control the gigantization, he should give up on killing Child since he was still dangerous. But in Kai's opinion, this was reckless because it would take many days to control the power. But although it was difficult, it was not impossible for Kai. Kai managed to dispel Child's poison, and then he slowly walked towards the magician. Child didn't understand how Kai managed to destroy everything with just one force. Then Child waved his staff, and he created a black wall of thorns. This was Child's strongest defensive skill. But suddenly the wall began to break. Having called the guy crazy, the sorcerer began to cast another spell. Until Kai broke through, Child was accumulating energy. Then he thought that Kai had stopped and was tired. Child thought Kai had smashed his hands until they bled, but there was a crash, and then they extended a hand to him. At that moment, Kai struck. His strength was so great that he broke the floor, and Child was only horrified. The next moment, Kai started beating him. Kai was warned that he shouldn't even try to deal with Child unless he got the eyes and gigantization. Having received one skill, it was up to Kai to decide what to do. But having both skills, he had to deal with Child. When everything was discussed, Wind showed no interest. Hercules asked why he did not speak like the one who killed the creator of chimeras, but Wind said he had nothing to add. After all, the guy said that in any case, everything would be visible, so Kai was on his way to success. Even after the attack, Child said he still wouldn't die. However, this did not frighten Kai. Kai understood that the sorcerer's body was stronger than steel, but a body that contained a lot of things could not be uniform. Using his eyes, Kai was able to see everything. After this, the sorcerer's cry of pain was heard. Kai started to tear off his hand, and the sorcerer asked him to stop. However, Kai had no intention of stopping. The guy didn't respond to requests to stop. And then Kai asked how many limbs he had torn off with his own hands. When all the information came flooding back to Kai, he was calm. However, he was quickly able to learn everything from his comrades. And Kai believed that all actions would give birth to an absurd person. After the tutorial was completed, Kai leveled up. The guy thought that the sorcerer could also consider him a boss. Kai's level increased twice. After Child's death, all the chimeras began to collapse. But the other players didn't understand what had happened. And Kai explained that the boss died, so they won't get up. Then everyone decided to check if their comrades were okay. Yulche was wounded, but Hargan was in his thoughts. But suddenly, the guy got angry. Everyone crowded around the girl, and Elidor provided assistance. Hargan promised to finish everything quickly and asked to take care of her. Afterwards, he turned to Kai, and he asked to talk alone. The guy didn't ask how Kai knew so much, but he said that because of Kai's actions, someone was seriously injured. He asked if it was necessary to kill the creator of the chimeras. When told that it was possible to simply kill the chimera and go through the tutorial, Kai replied that usually it was. But Harrigan said Kai might not have gone that far. Then the blonde asked how far Kai had to go to calm down. He asked if Kai would be satisfied when his companions died. Because of this, Kai also thought about the words. Outside the tower were the gods of other dimensions. The sky was clouded with chaos, hopelessness, and despair and was painted purple. Many rankers died to defeat them, and no one knew how many more such gods there were. Because of this, Kai constantly needed to become stronger and drag the world along with him so that he could become strong. But when Harrigan asked, Kai replied that he didn't know. Kai asked if the blonde was putting together a team that he could go with, but Kai wasn't looking for one due to similar reasons. But Kai couldn't go with anyone, and Hargan realized he needed an ally strong enough to keep him safe. Afterwards, Kai went to talk to the manager. When asked who it was, Kai replied that it was the tutorial director. Hargan began to address the man respectfully, but the man did not want to accept the favor because he was already ready to tear out Zeus's entire beard. And the manager understood how much he would hear because the creator of the chimeras did not have time to create the next boss. He said that thanks to someone, the tutorial would now be livable for a while, but Kai wanted to get a reward. Then the man said that Kai was more hasty than he seemed. It was up to Kai to decide how to use and protect it. Kosefi Jin, the guy was given the Stone of the Black God. Another name for the item is the fragment of Hades' helmet, and Kai absolutely had to get his hands on this item. Kai knew where the Sea God's stone was and where the lightning fragment remained. While Kai was thinking about his own, Hargan asked what Kai wanted, but then the manager decided to send them to the tower since the conditions were met. Finally, he said that although he didn't like Hargan, the guy also had a good reward. He told Kai that this was their last meeting and asked if he would be raising a mess upstairs, but Kai said it would be visible. Then the man said that with the new thing, Kai could have done something more serious. But suddenly, he thought that it was not bad that Kai was bringing chaos. The manager believed that a wave was needed to shake the tower. At the end of the tutorial, Kai was given glasses and some kind of item. After this, Kai found himself on the first floor. Kai decided to check what else he got besides the points. It turned out that there was an egg in the inventory. Hargan also arrived at that moment. At that time, they were on the outskirts of the first floor. When they saw the newcomers, they were surprised. Kai realized that the players were waiting for newcomers to recruit them into the guilds. But Hargan noticed something. He saw familiar faces. Then the guy asked if Kai was going to join the guild, and Kai was not going to. Hargan decided that this was not surprising, since Kai did not even want to find a team. But Hargan also wanted to say something about something recent. He asked if something had happened between Olympus and the manager. Kai asked if Hargan knew that Olympus, which is just, correct, and the guardian of the Order of the Tower. But Kai refused to explain his words and advised Hargan to find out everything himself. Then the blonde was again indignant that Kai simply left. Afterwards, he only followed Kai with his eyes, and he wished him to beware of jackals behind his back. Afterwards, someone approached Kargan. He noticed that Agamemnon from Olympus had come to him, and then the man thanked Hargan for being able to remember them. Hargan asked the gloomy warrior to convey his congratulations to Ares for recently becoming a high ranker. But Ares ordered that Hargan's words not be passed on until his mother was found. Afterwards, the boy heard that the heavenly ruler was not particularly interested in children, and the identity of his mother was unknown. The guy got angry, but the warrior asked him not to react so harshly. The man said that family ties are being created and wished Kargan to also start a family. Hargan was angry, but he understood that if he hit someone below him, he would only worsen his relationship with Olympus. Afterwards, he let the warrior go. But then the man decided to ask about Kai. But Hargan was in no hurry to answer and said that Kai was probably a friend type. The jackals refused to go up to the next floor. They only attacked new players, who they completely wiped out. And they called the period of the end of the tutorial the harvest period. Kai immediately noticed when he was being followed, and Kai thought that jackals were ideal to test concealment on. There were about 20 people following Kai. The leader of the jackals said that many of the newcomers received good items. They knew that Kai had not joined the guild and had no allies, but someone was uneasy about Kai. But suddenly, the head was surprised. He said the guy had disappeared, although he was in plain sight. After this, someone's screams were heard. Immediately, everyone grabbed their weapons. However, they were attacked from all sides, and they were unable to resist. After using his skill, the leader realized that it was not an illusion skill. Everyone tried to retreat, but it was too late. The leader couldn't believe that the newbie had the ability to hide. Having grabbed the man, Kai said that there was no need to irritate him by running away because he would catch them anyway. Not understanding why such a player was on the floor, the man heard that if he answered the question honestly, he would be released. He tried to resist, but Kai immediately hit him. Kai said that if he continued, the guy would continue too. And then the man agreed. And then they asked him if he knew where to find a man nicknamed Cloudless. The man did not understand how Kai knew that person, but Kai replied that he had hit the jackpot right away. Afterwards, Kai found himself in the hotel room. He was lucky enough to gather information quickly, so now Kai could relieve the tension. After all, this place was simply peaceful, but Kai was interested in where his comrades were now. He remembered spending time with his allies, and then Kai, too, was calm next to them. But at that moment, Kai decided that enough sentimentality was enough. The shrapnel worked on the jackals, but it was far from ideal concealment. Kai's abilities were insufficient, and there was no master to process it. Kai knew there would be no problem if he perfected this piece. Zeus and Hades took their positions because they had received powerful shards. But suddenly, Kai remembered someone who could work with the fragment. There was one good master in this place. Soon, Kai completed the player's registration, and then he looked for his master. But Kai didn't know the exact location, and there was no one to ask. Walking down the street, he met beggars. Kai ignored them when they said their children were suffering. And at that moment, a knife was pointed at the guy. But Kai immediately fought back. After this, other men also attacked him. While dealing with them, Kai said that if they were barely making ends meet, it was worth going upstairs. Having twisted their arms, he advised them not to harm others. But at that moment, Kai saw something. He found the right place. When he entered, he immediately thought that there was a steam room here. Kai asked if they should work until lunch. Coming out to the guy, the man was surprised. He said that Kai didn't look like a local and asked if he was lost. But Kai said that he came on purpose. The man replied that the boy could choose some items for himself, since they could be better than the ones he had. However, these swords were of poor quality. Kai said he thought the man was incapable of breaking. Then Uncle Vucaro got a little angry, and he asked Kai where he came from. But Kai replied that he was just a newbie and not to be feared. Seeing the number of floors he had passed, the man relaxed a little. Kai understood that he shouldn't name the man's real name yet, otherwise a catastrophe would occur. Then Kai said that he needed to make an item. The man immediately became interested in the subject, and then he carefully examined the fragment. He replied that he might be able to work with the fragment, but asked where Kai got it. After Kai's answer that it was a reward for the cleanup, the man was even more surprised. Afterwards, he asked how long it took to complete the tutorial, and Kai replied that it took 5 days. Then the man understood why the guy had such expensive clothes. And then he told Kai that at the moment, he could only process the fragment. But the man asked if Kai was ready to entrust this to him after he saw the goods in the forge. In response to a positive answer, the man said that Kai was crazy. When told that the man could have taken the item, Kai replied that he was good at reading people. Kai said that if they wanted to steal the stone, there would be greed in their eyes, but there was delight in them. And the guy added that he was sure the man wouldn't break the stone. And then he swung another sword. He had a good sword in his hands, considering the poor materials. Kai said the blade might become dull and the handle rough, but habit was evident. The man was surprised to hear that he had forgotten to mess up the weight balance. Then he asked what Kai was doing. When asked about his origins, Kai replied that he was somewhat similar to purebreds. The man didn't quite understand the guy, but he promised to do everything in the best possible way. However, he had a condition. He asked Kai to keep this order a secret. After this, Kai only had to wait about 10 days, but he still wanted to sit it out for 10 days. Kai also knew that the gathering of jackals would be in 2 days. While he was having breakfast, Hargan sat down next to him. He admitted that he had been looking for Kai everywhere and had used his connections. Kai wasn't surprised by this, but Hagen demanded to be given his number. But Kai admitted that he didn't expect that one day a man would ask him for his number. When Hargan objected to his indignation that he was a bore, Kai replied that he was not a funny person. When asked when he would rise, Hargan replied that he would move out in 5 days. He said that it took time for the team to work better together. Then Kai asked for help. When asked to get rid of the jackals, Hargan replied that with his team, this should be possible. However, he fell silent when Kai said that they would go together. Kai refused to explain the details and said to come tomorrow evening, otherwise he would go alone. But Hargan immediately agreed to go with him together. Afterwards, Hargan left because now he had a lot to do. Kai considered Hargan to be diligent since he wanted to develop with his team. But then Kai turned to the one who had been waiting for him for a long time. He asked to post it faster if there was any business for him. Afterwards, the man politely greeted the guy and said it was Agamemnon of Olympus. Kai said that he should have at least said hello to Hargan, but the man blamed it on the mission. Then the man said that their difference with Hargan was great and everyone was talking only about the monster that entered the tower. The man said that according to Hargan, they were something like friends, and Kai agreed that it sounded a little strange. The man praised the guy for not joining Hargan, as teams often broke up after the tutorial. But the man said that Kai had the right to climb to the top of the tower, and he should have chosen the same kind of companions. Afterwards, he invited Kai to Ares. Kai listened to the words about how Ares was different from a non-entity who didn't even know his mother. Ares was the child of Zeus and Hera and had already become a ranker. He offered Kai to become a follower of Ares instead of getting involved with a mudblood, but Kai didn't want to hear it. Kai knew that Olympus was the one who tried harder than anyone else to recruit new players, but Kai decided to leave it at that. Kai said that he had no intention of joining anything, and for 2 days he refused Hargan, who personally invited him to join the team. And then Kai began to ridicule the man's arrogant phrases. After all, he is not Ares, but he behaved as if he were the son of Hera and Zeus. Kai did not allow the man to speak and insisted on his own. Kai didn't want to cooperate with unworthy people like them. After this, the man got angry, and then he asked how many jackals could be mobilized. But he was told that the jackals were now collecting money. However, everyone already knew that Kai was a serious opponent. To begin with, Agamemnon ordered 100 men to be prepared, and as soon as the harvest time ends, they will kill Kai. 2 days later, Kai met with Hargan and asked the boy to follow him. They walked towards the man Kai was tracking. Hargan noticed that Kai was using those eyes again, and I remembered Child's phrase about whether Kai is related to the monkey. Hargan was sure those words were said about Wind. Wind became a high ranker less than 100 years after ascending to the tower. But Kai not only used his abilities, but also used Apollo's fire. Hargan didn't understand why Kai didn't join anything and who he was. But he also saw that Kai had the skill of gigantization. This skill was possessed only by Hercules, but also by those descended from the race of giants. Hargan assumed that Kai was from the race of giants. But suddenly, a strange voice pulled the guy out of his thoughts. Kai asked him to respond properly, and then he called Kai a respectable master. When they went inside, they were told that the trade was over, but Kai immediately turned to the Cloudless. He said he was looking for such a person. Instantly, the guy in front of him started running away. But Kai immediately caught up with the fugitive. However, that guy pulled out a dagger. He tried to hurt Kai, but the boy dodged. Then Kai angrily told the fugitive to sit still, and then he slammed him into the floor. Then Kai told all the known nicknames of the Cloudless One. He also said that this guy was the king of the jackals. But then the guy said that he was mistaken for someone else. But Kai asked why he then started running away, and Hargan silently watched Kai's actions. He admitted that it was absurd to consider the guy the king of the jackals just because he escaped. But Kai asked if the guy's blade looked like a normal one and asked him to look at the floor where the dagger was. And a trace of poison appeared on the floor. Poison was forbidden to be used on players, and this guy had to have permission to do so. But then, the fugitive wondered where the information could have leaked from, and then his face changed. He asked Kai how he knew his identity. The man said it was impudent and that there were powerful people behind him. At that moment, he turned his attention to Hargan. Then Hargan realized that Kai meant to respond to this. Suddenly, lightning appeared everywhere. At that moment, Hargan heard a question about whether Olympus had really betrayed them. But Kai said that there was no talk of betrayal. They only wanted to ask what orders Agamemnon had given. Kai said that the heavenly ruler was interested in the first floor, and his son was also there. Kai asked how long they would follow the orders of a low ranker. Then Hargan heard from Kai that Zeus would personally take care of the pack of jackals when the matter was completed. Only then did the king of the jackals ask what their request was. At that moment, Hargan was in a stupor. Kai asked how many jackals there were in total. There were about 1,000 of them, and Kai said to gather everyone and come tomorrow at midnight to the designated place. Kai asked not to tell the people of Agamemnon and Ares about this for his own good, and then he called Hargan to follow him. The blonde was furious then. After this, he demanded an explanation from Kai, but Hargan refused to believe that Olympus and the jackals were cooperating, and Kai watched as Hargan insisted that the name of Olympus was being sold. Kai said that he did not know Hargan's attitude towards Olympus, but now he advised to be careful. He said that then the ins and outs of Olympus would be revealed to Hargan. At that moment, the full picture began to come together in Hargan's head. The next day, Kai was waiting for Hargan, and finally he said that if the guy had stayed any longer, Kai would have gone alone. When asked if he had thought it all through, Hargan replied that he was born and raised in Olympus. Olympus was his home and family, and his father was his idol. Although he did not remember his mother, he would forever remember her words. She asked not to forget the pride that bears the name Olympus. Hargan realized that either this became his truth or he betrayed Olympus. Hargan didn't know if Kai was right, but he believed that the jackals should disappear because they were like parasites. And if they were a defect of Olympus, Hargan was ready to cut it out with his own hands. As agreed, all the jackals were gathered. Many noticed that the cave was damp and even squelched underfoot. Before the head arrived, everyone was discussing the fact that they were all gathered together for the first time. But finally, the king of the jackals appeared before everyone. Seeing him, everyone fell silent and bowed their heads. Then the leader ordered them to raise their heads. Everyone was surprised that the Cloudless One had never appeared before everyone in person before. But the conversations of his subordinates irritated the leader, and he grabbed his sword. He said that whoever opens his mouth will lose his head. The commanders also tried to shut up their subordinates, and the leader said that they had a difficult task ahead of them, which would require everyone's help. However, the leader of the jackals was sure of one thing. All the jackals supported him when he said that tomorrow they would rise to heaven. And then he wanted to introduce two people to everyone. They had two benefactors. Cloudless thanked them for coming all this way, and then he presented them with the Asgardian currency. He said that one bill was worth 1,000 points. The benefactor asked if this was all the money and was told that yes. The guy immediately realized that there were hundreds of thousands there, and then he replied that he would gladly accept them. And the jackal said that they were ready to carry out any of their orders. But the guy only wanted to say goodbye. And then he snapped his fingers, creating a spark. At one point, the entire cave was engulfed in flames. People were burning alive and did not understand how it happened. The Jackal King also did not understand how the fire spread so quickly. Then he realized that there was not water on the ground, but oil, and there was no smell, so the king assumed that they had used a powder to hide the smell. The man was surprised that everything turned out this way. He exclaimed that they were not Olympus, but Harganus retorted that he was from Olympus. And when asked why, the guy replied that they were a defect that he would get rid of. At that moment, Kai had already entered the fight. Jackal was ordered to capture the two guys, but they were no match for their opponents. In the chaos, the king of the jackals realized that he had made a mistake and that they actually wanted to kill them. At that moment, he wanted to contact Lord Agamemnon. However, he was unable to send the message. Kai asked if he hoped that communication would work well in such chaos. After all, the game set transmitted messages using mana, which was now overflowing the surroundings. In such chaos, message transmission could not work. In anger, the king of the jackals attacked Kai from behind. In a rage, he wished the guy death. At that moment, Kai did not see him, but suddenly he turned sharply towards the man, and suddenly the man froze. For some reason, his body stopped moving, and Kai, having said goodbye to the man, struck the final blow. When it was all over, Kai asked if Hargan was okay, and the guy asked about Kai, since they had killed 1,000 people. Kai realized that Hargan was like this, not because he was tired, but because he felt guilty. Kai said that he was fine, but he himself understood that Hargan had not yet been through a war and was not used to killing. Kai explained that murder, robbery, and kidnapping were the jackals' ways of earning money, and if they killed them, they would save many lives. And if Hargan's sense of guilt could force him to turn a blind eye to this, Kai didn't know who would benefit from this. Hearing this, the blonde froze. And then, he replied that Kai had a longer tongue than it seemed, and he said reasonable things. Afterwards, the boy perked up, and Kai was convinced that Hargan was resilient, because he had perked up his spirits after just a few words. Hargan was so correct that it tired Kai, but Hargan replied that Kai was not at all what he looked like. He explained that Kai didn't seem kind and was able to get involved in the matter without any benefit to himself, and our hero could take this as a compliment. Kai also showed his skills in the tutorial and thought further than Hargan. Hargan had been learning such things since childhood, and Kai replied that he knew how to say embarrassing things. But Kai replied that Hargan was wrong in that there was no benefit. Hargan was surprised by the money and the fact that Kai wanted to give it to him. Kai said that if the money was too dirty for him, he could refuse. After thinking for a bit, Hargan suggested splitting the money, and Kai wasn't surprised. Afterwards, Kai clarified whether Hargan took second place in the tutorial. Kaya was interested in what Hargan was given as a reward. Meanwhile, Agamemnon was angry that he could not contact the jackals. He was angry, but he knew they were unlikely to run away with the money. Suddenly, another soldier burst in and said that he had found jackals. Arriving at the right place, the man was shaking with anger. Agamemnon was surprised that the Cloudless One also died. Looking at the corpses, he suddenly asked what happened to the money. However, the money was not found, and this caused the man to scream angrily. But Kai now had almost 400,000 points. Even though the money was split in half, it was still a lot, and Kai didn't have to worry about his living expenses. However, Kai is not mine to exchange the bills now, because Olympus will understand that he is involved in what happened. Now Kai could find items from which he could mold a skeleton for the Dark God Stone. The stone was the highest ranked item in existence, and with the blacksmith, it was now acquiring its true value. But the problem was different. Even from the description, it was unclear what would hatch from the egg and when. Kai knew that some items might have strange descriptions, but he had never seen eggs like these. For second place, Hargan received the Hand of Thunder, which meant the egg must have been valuable. Perhaps there was something like the Godstone there, but Kai couldn't even guess. But suddenly, the guy noticed something. He noticed a pattern that was not there the first time, but suddenly Kai understood everything. From the drawing, he understood that the egg was connected with the external god. Suddenly, he saw a notification that the egg was greeting him, and Kai only wondered more about what it was. Over the past few days, Kai had a lot to think about. He didn't know whether the egg would hatch into an ally or a creature that would destroy the world. Creatures hatching from eggs often considered the first ones they saw to be their parents, so rankers always took their pets they raised with them. Kai thought it was all a wild gamble. But Kai told himself to stop worrying because thinking about it wouldn't change anything. Now he wanted to focus on something more important. The blacksmith immediately noticed Kai's arrival. The man said that the stone was really strong, and he wanted to ask something. He asked what kind of sword or armor the guy preferred. Kai didn't understand why they were asking about this, but it turned out that a byproduct of the stone had appeared. The blacksmith said that the stone had great power, so such powder would be more valuable. Kai knew that Hades' sickle was created from the powder obtained by processing the helmet fragment, but such a thing required the right materials. The man replied that the powder was a result of processing, so there was enough mithril for that. The volume was small, but for equipment, Volcaro suggested mixing it. Kai said that mithril had a decent price, and he figured it would cost around 300,000 points. Kai thought that he would have enough money if he exchanged the jackal currency, but he couldn't do that right now. Unexpectedly, Volcaro offered to take out a loan. Kai asked what if he didn't pay and ran away, but Volcaro said that he himself wanted to make something out of this metal, so he wouldn't be offended even if the guy ran away. He said that the value of the stone was much greater than that of mithril, and its value could not even be calculated. And now the blacksmith wanted to reciprocate the same trust in Kai. Volcaro turned out to be the same as Kai remembered him. This brought a smile to the guy's face, and then he pulled the blade out of his inventory. Anderkain, Fukrain. Kandiikias he, Alana Ishigodo to Durigurs Yubonis Kawawim, Itoayazi Fiduras, Gordilekas. He said that it didn't matter to him what the weight was as long as he could lift it. But Volcaro had the most confidence in the forging of the blade. A week later, Agamemnon was putting on his gear. He was full of doubts and didn't think that such a chance would come. After eliminating the jackals, he could have had good opportunities. He hoped to arrange everything around himself and gain benefits. He was then informed that all the required players had already been assembled. And the support was good, given the limitations of the tower. Afterwards, he ordered his army to advance. They needed to catch the criminal. At that time, Kai was destroying monsters, but the finality of fate hardly rose. Kai was thinking about how he had been hunting for the past 10 days, but suddenly he received a message. It turned out that Volcaro was calling him to his place. The finished stone was very beautiful, and the blacksmith could not look at him enough. He wanted to create a finished item, but there was no such opportunity. But at that moment, some kind of rumble was heard. The blacksmith realized that it was coming from the street, and because of this, he became wary. He understood that they would come for him soon, but he hoped that they would wait at least another day. When he went outside, he saw an army. Agamemnos did not expect to find him in such a hole. Volcaro asked why they were making such a noise, but then they told him that Hephaestus knew the answer to this question. Then everyone was surprised that Hephaestus was in front of them, and besides, it would be difficult for them to capture the rancor. But the commander said that on the first floors, rancors received restrictions. However, Hephaestus didn't care. He asked not to make fun of him and told everyone to attack. Agamemnos chuckled that the man didn't even have any equipment, but he called himself a rancor. Moreover, they also had a raider on their side, Chris. Hephaestus was surprised when he saw the guy. When Chris said that there were penalties for rancors for interference, he said that Hephaestus was also a rancor. Then he told the guy to attack. And the guy remained calm, but Hephaestus's blow caused an explosion. This explosion also affected other soldiers. But Hephaestus didn't care. He continued to fight fiercely with Chris. Their battle destroyed buildings in the area. Suddenly, Chryses said that he respected Hephaestus. For instead of gaining greater power, Hephaestus continued to hold the hammer in accordance with his beliefs. And then he kicked Hephaestus. But despite this, Hephaestus still looked menacing. Then he also attacked Chris. In this battle, Hephaestus did not hold back, and with all his might, he randomly attacked the players. At that moment, he was surprised, and scratches appeared on his body. Chris immediately said that the fine for this would be serious. Chris truly respected that Hephaestus had given up his power for his principles. Then Chris admitted that this was why he didn't want to fight. But at that moment, everything had to be thrown aside, and their collision created an even bigger explosion. After this, Hephaestus' body began to turn to stone. At that moment, the blacksmith noticed the shield. In the hands of Chryses was a shield created by Hephaestus. It was a shield with an image of a snake-headed gorgon. This duplicate was enough to suppress Hephaestus in his tired state. After this, the man collapsed to the ground. Chris thought that this was the end. Agamemnon also rejoiced at the end of the battle, and he ordered that the criminal be quickly brought in. But some people disagreed, and then one of the soldiers lost a leg. Kai stood up for Hephaestus. Kai was interested in what these lousy people were doing in this wonderful place. Then Agamemnon was surprised that Kai was behind everything. Everyone started whispering that Kai had set a new record in the tutorial, and everyone was wondering who he thought he was since he interfered alone. But Kai immediately recognized Chris and thought that it was madness for rankers to fight in such narrow streets. If the steward intervened in the fight, Olympus would lose influence on the floor, and Kai needed Hephaestus at least for the Gigantomachy. Kai was asked if he would stall for time until the petrification wore off, but Hephaestus had already begun to stir. This made Agamemnos tense. The petrification of the Aegis was active once per day, but the duration of the copy's effect is unknown. And if the petrification wears off, Hephaestus will be able to move again, and there was no more time to lose. Then the order was given to kill Kai and bring the criminal. Agamemnus was told that there would be a fine if they killed a newcomer, and for this, the soldier lost his head. The man asked what else they would say about the fine, and then he added that he would appoint as manager the one who would kill Kai and bring in the criminal. With this motivation, everyone immediately rushed into battle. Then Kai's sword began to absorb the power of the giant fire, and he attacked the soldiers with fire. They all started burning alive. The order was to retreat and attack again, but Kai's eyes found the trajectory, so he began to attack the soldiers furiously. No one could resist such an enemy. With just one swing of his sword, Kai could kill someone. But suddenly, Kai noticed someone approaching. To defend himself, he used a mana skill, and there was an explosion. Kai asked if they thought they could take it with numbers alone. Then the order was given to attack at once. Agamemnos didn't understand why those who had reached at least the 10th floor couldn't defeat a newbie. And the man refused to believe that there was a newcomer in front of them. Forming a pillar of fire, Kai caused the fire to consume everything. But he did not forget about Hephaestus. He wanted to ask how long Hephaestus would sleep, but someone's attack was approaching him. and a moment later, there was an explosion. The boy was pushed back by the force of the attack. Chris finally decided to intervene in the fight. When asked how he was connected to Hephaestus, Kai replied that he was a client of the blacksmith. But Chris thought it strange to interfere just because of such a relationship. Kai felt the power of Chris and understood that if he relaxed in front of the follower of Apollo, he would die. Having used gigantization, Kai knew that he could withstand 5 of Chris's attacks. But Chris didn't think the guy would be able to do much against him. Kai tried to hold back the subsequent attack. At that moment, all his equipment resisted the fire and held it back. However, Kai could not resist for long. Because of this, he immediately received a burn and realized that he could not withstand the attack with simple force. Kai thought about the ice crystals, but the fire was approaching again. The guy wasn't given a second to rest. Kai used a clot of mana, but he couldn't stop all the flames, and most of the attack hit him. However, Kai was still able to stand firm. But he received second-degree burns and knew that at this rate he would be fried. But the penalty to Chris for such an attack will also be strong. Instantly, wounds appeared all over the guy's body, and Kai was determined to withstand 2 more attacks. Kai wanted to hold on a little longer but suddenly tensed up. Chris quickly approached him and attacked, and Kai couldn't defend himself from the blow. Chris's blow launched Kai into the building opposite. But for this attack, the guy again received a fine and experienced pain. The fight was also making it harder for Chris to cope. Having broken through the wall of the building, Kai found himself inside. He thought that he had greatly underestimated Chris, who, despite his wounds, was fierce. He was wondering what the best course of action would be, but suddenly he noticed a light. The guy immediately recognized his subject. At that moment, Kai thought he was lucky. Chris was previously told that he would understand the tower's power once he passed the penalty. At that moment, Chris understood the meaning of Apollo's words. He thought that the tower was as if alive and protected the ecosystem of the lower floor. Agamemnon praised Chryses for his work. Afterwards, he ordered to capture the criminal and find the wounded. And Chris advised to just leave it. Agamemnon did not have time to be indignant at this. But the conversation with Harris was interrupted by a sudden explosion, and from there, Kai came out with a new artifact. Chris immediately noticed something was wrong and stopped Agamemnon. He immediately said seriously that Kai was dangerous. Dark Attribute Mana was a special case, but it also came from a dying person. But Agamemnon objected that they would deal with the guy themselves. But suddenly he was surprised. It turned out that his soldiers were prevented from reaching Hephaestus. In an instant, Kai reached the blacksmith, and the petrification was soon to dissipate. Because of this, the man became nervous and sent soldiers into battle again. Then everyone pounced on Kai again, and the guy got ready to fight back. At one point, destructive power began to emanate from him. Then all the soldiers were struck down and could not fight. Chris chuckled that the tower had summoned a monster, but Agamemnon asked how the boy could speak so calmly. Agamemnon considered it absurd when Chryses said that he should only participate in the capture of Hephaestus. But Chris also wanted to see everything to the end. At that moment, Kai continued to fight. Then he noticed that Chris had decided to join the fight again. Rancor slowly approached Kai. Chris found it amazing that Kai could control the mana of 2 attributes at once. Olympus would be even stronger if such a man were on its side. Chris offered to join them, promising to give Kai equipment, but the boy objected that such a thing could not be the goal. Having heard the refusal, Chris prepared to fight. Kai was surprised that the guy was still able to do this, but Chris didn't expect to hear such words from a newcomer. But perhaps in 100 years, Kai will talk about how he fought a rancor as soon as he got to the first floor. Although this will only happen if he can survive today. Kai noticed that Chris had decided to destroy and still wanted to take Hephaestus away. But if Hephaestus does not join Olympus, the next Gigantomachy may not happen. Kai was determined to hold out to prevent tragedy. With each passing second, the fire spread across more and more area. Kai was surprised that attacks of this level were still possible. Chris was perplexed to hear that he really was incredible. Then an explosion occurred. Agamemnon understood that using such force on the first floor was unacceptable, and it will be a miracle if the fine does not destroy Chris. Agamemnon was glad that the battle was over. But at that moment, someone attacked him. He turned around in surprise. And then Hephaestus hit the man in the face again. And he said angrily that nothing had been finished yet. Agamemnon was amazed that Hephaestus was not even afraid of the fine. But Hephaestus was surprised that Agamemnon was talking about something like a fine. After all, he definitely wanted to kill Agamemnon. Hephaestus, swinging his sword, did not hear the plea for mercy. But suddenly, someone intervened in the fight. As luck would have it, it was now that they decided to stop Hephaestus. At that moment, Agamemnon was shaking with fear. The first floor manager intervened in the fight. The manager said that if they wanted a good fight, they should go upstairs. But Hephaestus said he had no intention of fighting. When the steward turned to Agamemnon, he tensed up, and then the manager asked to convey something to Zeus. If he does something like that again, the manager will pull out every hair from his beard. Hephaestus chuckled at this scene. Because of that thing that was put into your head, the message will be conveyed verbatim. Hephaestus grinned at the insignificance of Olympus. When Kai was surrounded by fire, he saw a message that the egg was growing teeth, and he didn't understand whether this was help or whether they would kill him. Coming to consciousness, Kai mumbled. Hephaestus approached him to hear the words. Then Kai called him uncle, and Hephaestus was outraged by such speech. Kai said he was fine and asked about his uncle's condition, but the man asked how long he would continue to call him that. Then Kai replied that he couldn't call him aunt. Hephaestus considered the guy shameless when he said that any appeal would do since he had saved the man's life. Then Hephaestus fell silent. Having made several attempts to thank him, he was never able to say thank you to Kai. Because of this, Kai thought that Hephaestus was more timid than usual. Suddenly, the blacksmith confessed that his real name was Hephaestus. Kai was silent, so he was asked if he was surprised. The guy replied that he was very surprised, but Hephaestus thought that he either didn't know how to lie or wasn't trying. Hephaestus was convinced that Kai knew his identity, so he suspected that Kai was from Olympus. But now he knew that Kai was no ordinary player, and he was not from Olympus. Because the Olympians would go into hiding, Hephaestus decided to rent a good forge. Hephaestus promised to repay for the help and asked to wait a few days. He promised to make the best blade. This made Kai smile. The guy replied that he would wait. But Hephaestus ordered to go to the hospital. After leaving the hospital, Kai immediately ran into monsters. He had been receiving treatment all day, so he could now move. But everything worked out well for him, because now it will be easier for him to equip himself. Kai also knew that what happened would greatly impact the upcoming second gigantomachy, and he had difficulty controlling the stone. Because of this, Kai thought the difference was in the user. But after processing, the function of summoning hell appeared, and it was something like a source of power. And the stone was closer to the conductor of power than to the repository. But Kai learned to use it and began to get into it. Suddenly, he received a message from Hephaestus. When he arrived, Kai thought that the new workshop must have cost a lot. But even Hephaestus's low-quality equipment sold for a high price. Because of the silence in the forge, Kai decided that the work was finished. Hephaestus got straight to the point and handed over the item. But Kai was surprised that they had agreed on a blade, but they gave him a box. There was nothing inside it. Then Kai thought it was a surprise box. A little later, Kai realized that there were gloves inside. They were created by mixing mithril, and Hephaestus praised the boy's eyesight. But Kai didn't understand why Hephaestus made transparent gloves, because it wasn't easy. But suddenly he noticed a groove. Just at that time, Kai's stone arrived. Hephaestus made excuses, but Kai guessed that the blacksmith wanted to make it easier for Kai to carry the stone, and then he moved on to the blade. The blade turned out to be dark and very beautiful. Kai immediately thought that the blade was perfectly made. Then Hephaestus asked to choose a name for the blade, and Kai thought about the name. Kai attached importance to the materials in the stone and its appearance. And then he decided to choose the name Dark Knight Sword. But this choice surprised Hephaestus, and he thought that Kai did not have very good taste in names. After this, the Sword of the Dark Knight passed to Kai. The sword's name was chosen for a reason. The sword specialized in darkness and night. The sword exceeded Kai's expectations, as it could fight in darkness and night. Although Kai looked pleased, Hephaestus was angry that the sword was given such a name. But the sword fit Kai, and that was enough. Hephaestus asked if Kai would continue to climb, and the boy replied that it would be right. Then the man asked what Kai would do with Olympus, and Kai replied that he would cast him down from the very top to the bottom. These words surprised Hephaestus a little. After they finished, Hephaestus refused to see Kai off. But the farewell was as dry as before. This connection between them began a long time ago. Kai was surprised that the sword was made of adamantium, which was difficult to find. Hephaestus said that at least such a sword was needed for the fight, and Kai saw his hands. Kai realized that Hephaestus had used the metal of his hammer and forged a sword with his fists. But Hephaestus asked him not to chatter in vain and to take the sword. Kai thought it was the same as ripping out his heart and giving it away. Having said that he was glad to meet him, Kai bowed. The Colosseum test supervisor was doing her job at the time. While eating chocolate, Shuri checked the records about Kai. Kai's potential was rated at S level. Hargan was good too, but Kai attracted more attention. Suddenly, the girl's gaze turned forward. She saw Kai come alone to a test that was recommended to be taken as a team, but the girl believed that he might try to pass this place. Kai was in the testing room on the first floor. This test was not tricky. You had to defeat the enemy. Looking at the rankings, Kai saw Wind in first place, and compared to his pre-rebirth record, Wind's rating was too high. But Kai was glad to see Hargan and that he went 16 rounds. Perhaps Hargan was even taller than before his rebirth, for he now had the hand of thunder. Kai didn't know where Hargan was now, but he was determined to catch up with the guy. In this challenge, the more opponents you defeat, the more rewards you get, and you had to challenge your limits. Now Kai had to defeat the enemy. Noticing the guy, the orc roared. And then he rushed at Kai. Kai's opponent looked very furious, but Kai looked confident too. And with just one blow, he crushed the enemy. His blow cut the body into 2 parts. Afterwards, the orc collapsed to the ground. The first floor's test was over, but Kai's mission began now. Then Kai challenged him to the second test, and Shuri was surprised by the guy's strength. She considered it a historic event because Kai was faster than Wind, and Kai was much more furious in battle. He instantly dealt with all his opponents. Kai fought without stopping and did not use strong skills to conserve his strength. It seemed as if Kai was looking much further. Kai also aimed for the highest ranker record, and he continued to challenge again and again. Now Kai easily took control of the giant flame, and he attacked his new opponent. But the enemy was able to withstand the attack. Kai realized that there was no point in delaying and stopped holding back. Then he used partial giganization, and the enemy's sword began to break because of the flame. And then Kai defeated the enemy, and in that moment, everything around became quiet. The man said that this was his second defeat. The difference between the 2 winners was noticeable, but Kai replied that he would have had a harder time if his sword had not been so worn. But the man thanked the guy for a good fight. At that moment, Kai's stats increased, and Kai realized that he had now caught up with Wind, but he had to pass a test that no one could pass. But only 30 seconds were given to answer. The players were not allowed to rest. If there was enough time to rest, there would be no point in the test. After stalling for a bit, Kai took a breather, and then he threw down the gauntlet. At that moment, the final test began. Anger and energy penetrated the guy to the bones. Kai became wary, fearing his opponent, and then all that remained was to wait for him to appear. Then the last boss appeared. At that moment, Kai was attacked. The monster pounced and pushed the guy back. Kai was surprised that he was suppressed even with gigantization. Then he had to dodge. Wind told about that test. He was able to survive the tail strike due to his resilience, but otherwise, death would have occurred. Everyone didn't believe that this enemy was on the first floor and thought that Wind had made a mistake. But Kai understood that Wind could not have been mistaken. It was a serpent with 7 heads and tails and was close to dragons. The snake was sealed by Susanoo, and no one expected to meet him on the first floor. Kai chuckled that the stewards had been working tirelessly. Kai needed to get rid of the 8th head of Yamato no Orochi. Even just the snake's head looked furious, and Kai had to dodge such an opponent. Even though the monster only had 1 head, Kai's current body might not be able to withstand even 1 blow, so he had to be careful. And the snake furiously pursued the player. He tried to hit with his tail, but Kai dodged. But it turned out that the threat was looming again. But by reacting quickly, he was able to dodge again, and then he crept up behind the snake. Kai said that the Orochi he knew wasn't that weak. The guy attacked the head but did not cause serious damage. It turned out to be too shallow. But this only made the snake angry. and he tried to brush Kai away. The scales were so strong that even Kai's sword did not cause damage. He then tried to inflict damage along the body. Kai thought that this test seemed impossibly difficult, but he already knew that the tower never gave impossible tasks. Kai knew that something must have remained in Orochi's body. Shuri watched the test calmly. She noticed that for some reason the guy stopped attacking. Shuri thought the boy realized his arrogance. She thought that Kai would have only had to wound Orochi, but suddenly the guy said that he had found it. This made Shuri surprised, and Kai looked furious and confident. Then he jumped onto the snake's body, and he began to move up it. Saichen Fader's stabbing Chios. At that moment, he prepared his sword. Suddenly, Shuri realized what Kai was aiming at. She knew that there was a spot near Orochi's heart where no scales grew. Kai aimed at his only weak spot. Approaching, Kai prepared to attack, and then he thrust the sword into the serpent. The monster roared due to intense pain, but Kai's sword didn't go deep enough. Without ceasing, the snake fell to the ground. Shuri, however, considered this absurd. Then the girl thought that the myth had been revived. After that, Orochi was dead, and Kai's achievements were recorded in the Colosseum. Kai found this too difficult and thought that at levels above 60, it was already difficult to make money from hunting alone. And Kai still had 31 left to reach level 100. Suddenly, someone called out to Kai. In front of him was an elf with 6 blades on her back. She asked if he knew about the weak spot. Kai said the difficulty level seemed a bit much to him, so he took a closer look. Pointing to his eyes, he said that he had found a solution. Shuri thought he had eyes with golden pupils, but Kai replied that they had not reached that stage. Shuri noticed that Kai had the skills of a high ranker. She didn't know what faction Kai belonged to, but she was convinced of one thing. The elf said that she would not spread information about him, and Kai thought that she had misunderstood something. And then she wanted to give an additional reward from the manager. He asked for the sword to be given to the one who would defeat Orochi, and finally, that day came. Having handed over the blade, Shuri admitted that she herself did not know what this thing was, but it turned out that the blade was of very low quality. This situation made Shuri a little confused, but Kai recognized the fragment of Susanu's sword, and other fragments had to be found. Shuri suggested they talk about another reward, but Kai replied that he was satisfied. As a reward, the boy was given the 8th heart of Orochi. The poison stored in the heart cannot be taken in the usual way. The elf congratulated the boy on the award, the value of which could not be calculated even in points, and she advised not to accept the artifact thoughtlessly. Then Kai wanted to say goodbye. But suddenly the egg reacted and complained of hunger, and then it began to manifest itself. Shuri, alert, immediately grabbed the blades. Kai realized what was meant by the appearance of himself. A multitude of eyes and teeth appeared around them. Shuri didn't understand how anyone could get in here if the place was protected by a tower. But Kai asked her to stop. He asked her to wait a little, and at that moment, the egg began to absorb Orochi's 8th head. Shuri was surprised that it started eating the corpse. Shuri said that the corpse belonged to Kai, and it was none of her business, but she asked if it was his ability. Kai answered doubtfully that yes, but he himself certainly wasn't sure. Afterwards, he asked the creature if it had eaten its fill. The creature's joy made Kai think it was creepy, but it behaved like a child, and then it began to fall asleep. Kai guessed that the reaction from him appeared now because the egg began to hatch. Shuri asked him if he understood what it was, and Kai did indeed understand a little better. The elf believed him to be a descendant of wind, but now she had her doubts. She said that Kai had a lot of secrets and she would not reveal them. She also hoped to hear news about him from the upper floors. And Kai learned the habit of saying goodbye to those who have passed the tests. Shuri was a naive, yet straightforward, strong, and beautiful warrior. Kai replied that he was glad to meet you. After that, his name rose to the first line. That same evening, everyone was discussing the fact that the ranking of first place had changed for the first time in thousands of years. Everyone was talking about how the newcomer had arrived from some Earth that almost no one had heard of. And everyone noticed that Kai took first place in every test. The 9th floor's challenge was a labyrinth. However, instead of looking for a way, someone broke down the walls. Kai turned out to be such a person. For discovering a new path, Kai was given extra points. The goal of the challenge was to find a way, but Kai made several new passes, which ruined the difficulty for subsequent players. Then he decided it was time to move forward. Seeing the guy, Hephaestus remained silent. And Kai was all beaming with happiness. He happily informed his uncle that a month had passed. Hephaestus was outraged by the guy's impudence and told him to wait. After some time, Hephaestus turned his attention to Kai. He asked Kai if he was hot, and he replied that he was. It was very hot in the workshop, but Kai looked fine. Continuing his work, Hephaestus asked why the final test took 9 days, but Kai evaded the answer. Then Hephaestus became indignant that Kai came for an order but did not answer questions. Kai replied that the labyrinth didn't necessarily have to have just one exit, and that it took time to create new ones. The man said that Kai never acted like ordinary people, and he was interested in how Kai would cope with the next challenges. Kai promised to tell me when he comes again. Hephaestus asked if he would need a new blade for the task, as this was the worst thing he had ever done. He explained that he focused on the materials the armor was made from, so there was no mana conductivity. But it was Kai's order, so Hephaestus said it was the best creation. Kai tried to activate the mana sword skill, but it didn't work. Then he said that he liked it, and for Hephaestus it was also a new experience. Hephaestus said that no one would have thought of such a blade, but suddenly fell silent. Kai handed him a large payment, saying that he shouldn't get used to free things. And then he said that he would come again. Immediately after this, Kai headed towards the portal. Finally, he could go to the double-digit floor. Kai requested to be sent to the 10th floor of Murim. And after just a couple of moments, he was transported there. The ecosystem on the vast continent was created by the existence of strong people, and here the test began immediately. Everyone was trying to recruit players to their team. Each one was trained in martial arts and passed the test of the chosen clan, and because this test was different from others, many players stayed here. Kai thought that this place looked like a bazaar. Suddenly, someone called out to him. A man asked if Kai was a swordsman. He said that it was fate and Kai had to join them. However, Kai didn't want to listen to him. He thought that the big clans were not interested in this place. The man interrupted and asked if they were listening to him, but Kai replied that he wanted to join another clan. But the man was offended that Kai ignored their clan. He didn't plan to do it this way, but he thought it was also right. The man said that Kai was acting cautiously, but was overly conceited. Kai realized that he had gotten himself into an annoying situation. The man was demonstrating his strength in front of the newcomers and drawing attention to himself. Kai asked him if he was afraid of a fine, but the man replied that Murim had its own way of life. The man wanted to say that it was too late to ask for forgiveness, but he was interrupted. Kai had no intention of asking for forgiveness, and he couldn't do anything about the man behaving this way. Kai told his opponent to come closer, but then the man was frightened by the guy's look, and then Kai extended his hand to him. After a while, everyone turned their attention to the man and began whispering. Among the crowd, he was the only one kneeling, and then he started running away from the shame. He was even shaking a little with shame. 10 days after rising to the floor, Kai was running through the forest. There was no suitable means of transportation in Murim, so people had to move around on their own feet. Getting around in Murim was a big problem. But despite this, Kai almost reached the right place. And after a while, he walked through the forest alone. All that could be heard was the rustling of leaves and Kai's movements. But he knew that someone was watching him. He believed there were about 20 people, but each of them had good skills. The onlookers didn't believe that the guy was simply lost. At that moment, Kai said that there was no need to be so careful because he was not an enemy. And then he asked if this was the base of the divine cult of the heavenly demon. People were surprised that Kai knew where he was going. Kai thought that something similar had happened to jackals before, but this was incomparable. This clan has long competed with the Murim Alliance, a union of the entire Murim world. Hans was a pureblood from the heavenly demon divine cult and had climbed more than 40 floors. From Kai's energy, Hans concluded that he was not some kind of rabble. He then asked Kai to state his name, floor, and demonstrate his skills if he wanted to join. But to his surprise, Kai refused. Kai said that he came to pass the test of their cult. On the way they talked, and Hans said that Kai probably knew why the players didn't choose their cult. But the answer that the probability of passing the test was small was incorrect. Hans said there was simply no such possibility. He said that no one could pass the test, so there was an unspoken rule not to take it. It was impossible to join the clan unless you had gone through many floors, so Kai understood why their authority had fallen. Soon Hans brought Kai to the right place. Then Kai took over the disposition, and if they go the wrong way, they will fall under the influence of illusion. Hans explained that they had to be careful or they would get lost, but Kai already knew that. Hans asked to be careful and follow them, but it turned out that Kai was no longer around. Kai moved, using his fiery eyes. They paved the way for the boy to follow, but he got confused several times at the crossroads and no longer understood how long the road was. But suddenly Kai noticed something. There was a fork in the road ahead, but he saw that both paths were real. Even though both paths were real, Kai hesitated. But suddenly, he felt the wind from the left, so Kai decided to go in that direction. And the further he walked, the more the surroundings changed. Until finally, a small building appeared ahead. Inside it sat a gray-haired man. Kai immediately recognized the living legend of the world of Murim. It was a ranker who lived long before the world of Murim entered the tower. Then the first test of the cult was passed by Kai. The guy was surprised that the door was closed, but the wind was blowing through the room, so Kai assumed that he was not actually standing in the room. The man asked when Kai realized that this was also part of the test. But Kai asked where there could be a test where one had to follow another person. The man was amazed that Kai found the way on his own, and then everything around went dark. And a moment later, it turned out that Kai was standing in the middle of the forest. Due to the lack of a system window with the result, Kai thought that the question was also part of the test, and Kai became interested in the man. Some clans said that there were demons living in the heavenly demon cult. But this was nonsense, because Kai found himself in an ordinary village. Suddenly, Hans became indignant and asked how Kai ended up there. Kai didn't want to waste time on the story and simply said that he got there first. Understanding the boy's reaction, Kai replied that how he walked didn't matter. Kai said that he was tired from the road and asked if the cult would provide the test subject with accommodation. Someone was outraged that this didn't make sense, and Hans said that even he, having been in the cult for 50 years, had followed a learned path, and one could only guess what Kai was actually doing. Soon, Kai was taking a bath. At that moment, he could finally relax from the road for a while. But suddenly, I decided to inspect the premises. He thought that many would want to join here if the test were easier. But because of the leader's stubbornness, Kai thought there was a reason for it. Kai was thinking that his work was certainly not in vain, when suddenly, the egg revealed itself. For some reason, it reacted to the heat and began to move. Kai had previously been told that, according to rumors, the test in this cult was impossible to pass, but the reward there was exorbitant. But the heavenly demon appeared in the world at the beginning of the war and before the creation of the Chronos Spring, so there was not much information about it. All that was left for Kai to do was go through everything himself, while in the meantime, they discussed how the war in Murim looked tempting. According to the allies, it was possible to obtain both the elixir and the martial arts book, but the reward would be difficult to obtain. But suddenly, someone asked if anyone present had managed to not win a single victory in the Murim War. Then Win said they were asking for it. Kai watched the guy's indignation that everyone had started the competition, but they hadn't said anything to him. Win said he didn't remember anything interesting happening on that floor, but he was asked who had asked him to go straight to the next floor. But the guy was indignant that he didn't know about this, and that he was the only one who didn't know about it. Kai chuckled at the memory of how Wind, with his character, could not accept that he had missed the war. No one could figure out what was hidden in this place, but Kai was determined to do so. Then the egg began to manifest itself again, and Kai was a little nervous that the egg didn't sit still for a second. About a month ago, a few days after clearing the Colosseum, Kai was examining the egg. He noticed that the size had increased several times. The egg was suspicious and had the patterns of the outer god, but Kai was convinced of one thing. It was indeed the egg of the outer god. Kai wasn't sure what the creature would look like when it hatched, even though he had fought them many times. Then Kai thought that if the others were with him now, they could discuss this together. And Kai wondered whether to keep the egg alive or not. But suddenly the egg nodded at his words. Because of this, Kai realized that the rest of the time the egg ignored him. And this made the guy a little angry. And then he said that it was no good and apologized. But the boy's actions scared the egg, and when Kai swung his sword, it even screamed. But nothing happened at that moment. As Kai expected, nothing happened then. Kai knew that the creature could have released its power like that, but it did not, which meant it recognized Kai as its master. At that moment, Kai didn't understand whether he couldn't strike or whether he was not allowed to. From that moment until now, Kai has been watching the egg. When asked if the egg liked being in the water, it nodded. Just as Kai was surprised that it was responding, the egg immediately began to fall asleep. Then he was indignant that the egg slept for the whole month, but in the end, only said a couple of words. After this, Kai was again left wondering whether he had accidentally entered a tiger's lair. The next day, everything happened in the divine cult of the heavenly demon. Inside, a meeting of the 4 heavenly lords was being held. They discussed how, for the first time in 30 years, someone had challenged them, but the Lord of Fists corrected that 34 years had passed. When asked who Kai was, the Tao Lord only expressed indignation that one could not be so disinterested. But the Blade Lord demanded to stop chatting and tell about that man. But upon hearing that Kai had turned the ranking upside down, the man replied that rumors were always exaggerated. However, according to other lords, the records in the tower did not lie. The first one asked to start was the Lord of the Spear. At that moment, many people began to approach him, and after that, they all gathered around the lords. Showing respect, they bowed their heads before them. Then the door to the temple opened. Everyone was on guard, expecting to see Kai. Everyone immediately realized that the guy didn't show the slightest bit of excitement about the presence of the lords. Kai immediately recognized 4 lords who had achieved success in their field. But someone said that nothing less could be expected from Kai. They asked to start the second test immediately, but suddenly someone interrupted everyone. The man apologized for interrupting, but he had a request. In front of everyone, he asked to check Kai. The lords thought about it, and almost immediately they gave the man their go-ahead. The fine was imposed only for visible aggression, which means the man was very strong. Then Kai decided to try something. He said it didn't feel like an official test. The Blade Lord agreed with this and decided to offer a reward. In front of everyone, the Lord said that as a reward, he would give one of their medicines, a scarlet blood pill. This made Kai grin. And saying that it suited him, he grabbed the sword. Due to the test, some of Kai's opponent's restrictions were lifted. The atmosphere around them immediately became tense. Even though the opponent was penalized, Kai still considered the challenge too difficult. After all, people of the level of heavenly lords were speaking out against him. While Kai was thinking that he didn't expect this, the enemy turned to him. The man said that Kai passed the first test. The opponent's speech was interrupted because Kai assumed that the man had not received such recognition. Kai chuckled and hinted that the opponent was not as outstanding. This made the man lose his temper, and then he rushed furiously into battle. In an instant, he was able to reach Kai, but despite his speed, Kai dodged the blow. Then the man was once again surprised by the boy's abilities, but Kai remained just as calm. After that, Kai constantly kept his defense and did not attack. The man then admitted that he had been unable to obtain a confession. The man said that he spent his whole life trying to pass this test. Time after time, he steeled himself in battle and issued a challenge, but he did not understand why the stranger was able to pass the test. The man asked who Kai was to receive a confession, but Kai only said that the man was no longer a child. Then he finally drew his sword, and for the first time in all this time, he stopped the attack with his sword. And then he was able to parry the blow. Due to Kai's maneuver, the man lost his balance. And when he looked back, he saw that Kai was ready to attack. Using gigantization, Kai struck his opponent. One blow was enough to knock down the enemy. In response to the man's question, Kai replied that he was too weak to pass the test. Then there was silence in the room. The Blade Lord looked the most gloomy of all. But after a moment, a grin appeared on his face, and then he exclaimed that for the first time in a long time, he saw something interesting. Everyone chuckled, wondering what a spectacle it would have been without the fine. And then the Blade Lord said to give the guy the scarlet pill. As a reward, Kai was immediately given a pill. Kai replied that he didn't even try, so that was enough. Everyone chuckled at the fact that usually a player from the 10th floor wouldn't even be allowed to touch such an object. Everyone admired the way Kai wielded the sword, but the boys said he was just teasing. Then the Blade Lord suggested moving on to the next test. The Lord of the Fist was responsible for the second test. The test would take place in 3 months, and during that time, Kai could ask for equipment, medicine, clothing, or shelter. Kai knew that this lord was considered the weakest, but considering the force he put into his attack, he was very strong. But Kai suggested moving straight to the test. Everyone was surprised by his decision. The Lord of the Spear immediately said that Kai's decision seemed disdainful towards their cult. Kai apologized for any offense he might have caused, but continued to insist on his own. The Fist Lord also wanted to proceed to the test, but the Blade Lord stopped him because the test was given by the cult leader. He said that only a heavenly demon could change the test. The Lord then repeated that Kai was given 3 months and he had to figure out how to counter the Fist Lord's techniques. At that moment, Kai had to come to terms with it. Soon everyone was whispering about the stranger who looked down on the lords. When discussing Kai, everyone said that he looked normal. But Kai was irritated that everyone was discussing him so actively. Moreover, the person who is the second most powerful person in the clan personally saw Kai off. But it turned out that this was not an order, but a personal whim of this lord. He admitted that he hadn't met people from the outside for a long time, and he was excited about meeting them in person. To Kai, it looked like the lord wanted him to pass the test. But in this clan, Kai felt differently because usually people wanted to join their clan for the sake of its prosperity. Soon, they came to the right place. The Lord offered to look at books and weapons, but asked why Kai needed a hospital. Kai decided to ask again whether they would definitely provide him with everything except high-class martial arts and miraculous potions. And when they answered that this was indeed the case, Kai chuckled and said that they would regret it. Within the clan, everyone was busy with their own activities. It turned out that Kai asked the doctor for all the available remedies, and the healer didn't understand how Kai would use everything alone. The doctor became alarmed and asked to return all the medicines that Kai would have left after 3 months. But Kai agreed for him that he would have to compensate for the cost of the damaged medicines. Afterwards, Kai was about to leave. The doctor whined, asking to return what was left, but Kai understood that there would be nothing to return. Soon, Kai found himself in the training cave. Kai knew that the only way to get in here was to open the passage from the inside, and this was perfect for him. Then he began to pull the contents out of the inventory. Thus, mountains of medicinal products formed on the sides of it. Instantly, he began to absorb it all. But soon, he began to choke on it. It was the first time Kai had taken medication to such an effect, but it was so disgusting that he would have preferred to be stabbed with a knife. Some of the mixtures were poisonous, but Kai did not take too much of them, so he limited himself to colic. And all this was for the sake of Orochi's heart. Before this, Kai didn't know where to get enough medicine to neutralize his poison, but he was very lucky. Suddenly, the egg opened its mouth, reacting to Orochi's heart. But Kai forbade him to think about it, promising to make scrambled eggs out of him otherwise. After the egg fell asleep, Kai was about to continue. As soon as Kai accepted the heart, the poison spread throughout his body. Suddenly, Kai started to feel sick, so he realized that more medication was needed. His hands were stained with his own blood from where he had vomited. The next moment, Kai fell to the ground, his mana constantly rising. He didn't understand why her growth had become so abnormal, but it turned out that the mana master's skill had started to work. Then Kai thought that he could absorb all the mana from Orochi's heart. As Kai continued to eat the medicine, he didn't think it would be so difficult. And then he realized that this would take him a lot of time. A month later, someone came to that cave. People were surprised that it felt as if Kai would sit in the cave for the entire 3 months. Hans thought everyone wanted to learn secret fighting techniques, but Kai's actions were unclear. To warm up, the Lord of Fists trains every day, but what was Kai doing? It was also unclear why Kai needed the herbs, but suddenly Hans noticed something. Then the entrance to the cave opened. The one who came out of it asked if they had come to meet him. but the warriors were surprised to see Kai. Soon, Kai was eating the food offered to him. The others watched him silently. He was asked if he was hungry and was told that there were supposed to be cereal balls in the cave. But after taking more and surprising the others, Kai replied that he didn't want to eat something tasteless. Then the men were surprised that Kai had been eating herbs all the time, but there were no signs of injury or poisoning. Suddenly Hans realized. He knew that some items were not to be consumed because of the poisons they contained, but with antidotes they could be taken. Then Kai stood up and immediately said goodbye. Hans asked if Kai would go back to the cave. However, the guy asked where the martial arts archive was. There was an impressive security presence on the archive grounds. Many of them, in Kai's opinion, were close to the ranker levels. Then someone greeted Kai and said that they would accompany him, and soon he was brought to the right place. Kai was amazed that he was allowed to read all the books. However, one door was forbidden to enter, and everything else was completely at Kai's disposal. The archive contained techniques that could be given to an outsider, but it was many times larger than those Kai had already been in. But since there were 2 months left before the test, Kai wanted to get everything done in a month. Kai needed to find a way to stand up to one of the strongest masters in the world of Murim, and Kai was looking for something specific. He was looking for a technique created by the heavenly demon, and finally he was able to find it. A month later, the Blade Lord was informed that Kai had spent the first month in the cave and the second month reading books, and they believed that Kai decided to read all the books, although they believed that this was only possible in 3 years. Lord admitted that the guy's actions were peculiar, but another person said that Kai was wasting his time. Then the Lord admitted that he could not understand or predict the boy's actions, but that was why hopes were pinned on him. That day, Kai left the archives earlier than usual, having finished his business. The guy said he got everything he was looking for. A month later, preparations for the test began. It was reported that in the 3rd month, Kai again locked himself in the cave. This made the Lord of Fists wonder if there was any point in his 3-month isolation. But he found it inspiring, so he promised to try not to kill the guy. People were happy that on this day they would see the Lord's skill. There were also whispers about Kai, saying that the major guilds were fighting over him. At that moment, the Lord of Fists appeared before everyone. The mere sight of him made many feel pressure, and the Lord noticed that the cult had weakened, and now there were only children in it. Then he ordered everyone to be silent. He demanded that they show respect, because this was a test from a heavenly demon. At that moment, there was a deathly silence, and then Kai appeared in front of everyone. He asked what was wrong with the atmosphere. The man said that Kai was late, but the boy replied that the main character appears at the end. The Lord of Fists got straight to the point and said he was curious to see how strong Kai had become over the months. And Kai said again that they would regret giving him 3 months. The guy had to dodge or block his opponent's attack. The Lord looked very furious in the first attack, but despite this, Kai did not lose his calm. The next moment, a bright light illuminated the entire hall. The Lord's power was devastating, but Kai was able to dodge the attack. Then he realized that it would be bad if he fell under the next attacks. The Lord, however, believed that evasion was a good decision. If Kai tries to block the attack, there will be nothing left of him, according to the Lord. Unlike this fight, last time Chris was injured and had severe limitations, so Kai immediately felt the difference, and the Lord himself was stronger than that ranker. The next moment, the Lord's fists became faster. Thanks to his eyes, Kai was able to dodge. But after the last attack, the Lord froze for a moment, and then he released all his energy. However, he was indignant that Kai dodged again. He thought it was because of Kai's skill. Red eyes. Then the Lord understood why Kai was so confident. He could predict. He chuckled at how ridiculous it seemed. The man exclaimed that martial arts are more than just auxiliary skills. And then he swung. And this time, the man believed that Kai would not be able to dodge. But others felt the attack would cause damage beyond the hall. At that moment, they decided to create a protective barrier. But Kai became wary of their actions. He guessed that something was about to happen. Hoping that the attack's long range will make it less powerful, Kai decides to block the attack. The man thought that this might be the right decision. But he said that Kai had run into the wrong opponent. At that moment, the 3rd attack began. She was so strong that she affected everything around her. The attack nearly injured some spectators. Everyone was surprised by the power of the divine rank. But Kai was able to withstand that blow and was able to pass the test. The guy thought that such strength was consistent with a player climbing a tower. Although Kai was able to block, he acknowledged his opponent's strength. The Lord assumed that it could be blocked, but to his surprise, Kai was still standing on his feet. This made him grin. And then he asked if Kai would like to continue. Kai immediately realized that the man was serious. There were restrictions around him, but that was exactly what Kai was looking for. Then the man was surprised by the boy's sudden strength. Although Kai said that it couldn't be called the power of a heavenly demon, but only an incomplete shell. But the Blade Lord knew that even in its base form, it was the beginning of a heavenly demon. And now, no one could imagine what else Kai was capable of. Then Kai said that he would make the first move for the Lord of Fists. After that, he attacked. At that moment, Kai had already withstood the Lord's 47th technique. The Lord immediately noticed that he was uncomfortable fighting against the heavenly demon's martial art. But he noticed that Kai's unfinished technique was weakening. When the man said that they would fight fairly, Kai chuckled, not expecting to hear that from a ranker. At that moment, there were already 59th sustained technique. Kai noticed how the difference between their strengths had increased dramatically. The boy suggested that the technique was weakening, and the man chuckled that he should be ashamed that the fight was going on for so long. But the Lord believed that the battle would soon end. Kai immediately noticed that the man's fine had increased, meaning the technique would be more powerful. But Kai's stamina began to run out, so he became weak. Because of this, he had to use the mana ball skill. But this did not stop the Lord, and he prepared his fist for a new blow. The next moment there was an explosion. In the midst of that chaos, the Lord of Fists remained standing. The Lord considered Kai to be abnormal, considering that he fought with the Lord after barely reaching the 10th floor. But at that moment, he decided to end it all, and he thought that he was also crazy for enjoying the fight. Because of his attack, the Lord was fined again. Then he shouted at Kai to attack him. But Kai was already quite exhausted from the battle. The Lord asked why Kai was standing and where his arrogance had gone. At that moment, Kai was open to attack. He took the hit and was able to withstand that technique. But immediately after this, another blow followed. Kai managed to dodge it, and the Lord thought that things were now becoming more fun. But Kai wasn't so happy, because he couldn't counterattack, because he wouldn't be able to withstand the blow. But the Lord told the boy that there was no point in acting weak when they were just starting out. He asked Tak if Kai would continue to dodge. But a protracted fight was not beneficial for Kai, so it was necessary to finish. Kai just needed to close the distance and force the enemy to stop attacking. Because of this, he used gigantization again, and so he was able to intercept the Lord's fist. Due to the large difference in strength, Kai's strength points were temporarily converted into stamina points. But such a step cost Ki his one arm, which was now damaged. But now he did what he wanted. He stopped the enemy and found a loophole for himself. The Lord was surprised that the boy was able to block the attack from such a distance. But then he noticed Kai's sword. At that moment, the guy had already struck. At that moment, a small amount of the Lord's blood was spilled, and Kai was completely exhausted. One arm was damaged, and he would no longer be able to use it in combat. And the Lord was amazed that he had shed blood in the duel. He chuckled and realized that he had given Kai the opportunity to attack. If they had continued, the Lord would have won, but it was a test, not a duel, so Kai's victory was recognized. Everyone considered it a real miracle, but the other lords were calm. The Blade Lord thought that perhaps Kai was worthy. Someone wanted to say that the test was not according to the rules, but the Blade Lord would not accept objections. Moreover, the heavenly demon himself was watching what was happening, and it was recognized that Kai passed the second test perfectly. Soon, the Spear Lord reported that everyone went to the library to look for that very technique. The Blade Lord replied that it was no accident that the technology was in the public domain, but it was difficult to distinguish from the others. Finding the technique was a challenge in itself, so the lords believed that a Fist Lord had nothing to be ashamed of. After all, no one could have imagined that Kai would learn that technique. But the man only grinned at the words about shame. Everyone was perplexed by his reaction. Under those conditions, Kai managed to find a chance to counterattack. The man said he hadn't had this much fun in a long time, and Kai had the opportunity to surpass the cult leader. But because of the Lord's joy, it didn't seem to others as if he had just lost. Only the Blade Lord remained serious. Soon Kai was to meet the leader for the final test, but the guy was upset that his mana had not reached a 3-digit figure. Kai understood that if the Lord had not admitted defeat, the test would have failed. But now it was not so important for him because the second test had been passed. Kai recalled how the doctor was outraged by the lack of medicines because even the merchants did not come to them. But now Kai had a rank A heavenly demon skill, and in the next test, Kai will have to personally meet the head of the cult. At that moment, someone knocked on his door. It turned out that Kai had already been called. Soon, Kai came to the headman's main palace. He was informed that the chief only wanted to see Kai. When he entered, Kai did not feel anyone's presence. But Kai believed that it was still difficult for him to notice the presence of a high ranker. But suddenly, Kai noticed a notification that the egg had rolled away. This is how he understood which way to go. It turned out that the leader was there the whole time. The man looked very stern when he saw Kai in front of him. Kai said he was informed that the man was calling him. Next, the head asked about the condition of Kai's hand. Suddenly, the sword's effect was activated and the wound healing accelerated. Somehow, the leader noticed Kai's sword, and then he told Kai that he would like to have such a sword for himself. But Kai replied that one of his uncles would eat him alive if he did not save his weapon. The man recognized the sword forged by Hephaestus, and Kai asked if they knew each other, but the man admitted that he was only testing Hephaestus' swords. He suggested moving on to the finale, but Kai was surprised. He wondered how he would do it with his sore arm, but the man reminded him of his words, that he was fine. Then the leader replied that Kai would not need to fight. But Kai was wary because he wanted to approach the final in the best possible condition. Then he saw the man disappear ahead. Then he was surprised by the illusory barrier. That barrier turned out to be more reliable and elusive, and Kai's eyes could not cope with the resistance to the illusion. The next moment, Kai realized that he could not pass through the barrier. But then someone grabbed him by the shoulder, and then they dragged the guy along. Kai found himself in the middle of empty space. At first, he didn't understand what was happening. But then I looked closer and saw the head of the cult. Then the man said to follow him. Using fire, Kai continued to move forward. When asked about the spirit of the heavenly demon, Kai replied that he had already mastered it. And then he wished the guy good luck in the future. But Kai didn't understand why the man said this. Suddenly, the egg in Kai's inventory bared its teeth. Ahead of them, there was a purple fire. Kai immediately guessed that this force was from outside the tower. The man replied that they called it the sacred flame. There has long been a prophecy that their cult protects the flame in order to find a master for it. And every heavenly demon dedicated his life to this. Kai asked if they believed in the prophecy, and the man replied that they used to be a religion, and when religion weakens, so does the support. And after many years, factions appeared in the tower that were stronger than their cult. And as the head of the cult, the man was left with no choice. He began conducting tests to find those who were worthy. Under the guise of testing, he could continue to protect the flames, which is why they were so heavy. Kai learned that besides him, the Blade Lord had reached this stage. However, he failed. And now it was time to test Kai. It was necessary to hold out in the sacred flame until it accepted Kai. Kaya was immediately engulfed in flames. Kai found this very difficult, since such tests could only happen at the end of the tower. And Kai didn't know if he could even survive the cult leader's test. He was able to pass the second test thanks to technology. However, in the flames, Kai will be an ordinary person. But he accepted it and moved forward. He noticed that the flames were growing, becoming saturated with fear. Like Kai's eyes, his clothes also resisted the flames. Kai knew that this power burned those people who feared it. The egg in the inventory bears its fangs, but Kai told it to sit still. After all, if it eats everything, Kai will have nothing left. Kai had not felt for a long time that there was something more terrible than death. He still remembered those days when he fought with them. But if he is afraid of this, he will not be able to master the flame. At that moment, his gaze gained confidence. Then Kai said that if the flames were an external god, he was already sick of them. Leaving behind his sword and a broken world, Kai returned to the past to set things right. That decision had been made by Kai and his comrades many times. And from that moment on, Kai continued to move forward towards his goal and became stronger. Kai said that he came back to defeat them. Then the flames above him began to thicken. It burned, but Kai tried to resist it. Then the stone in Kai's gloves also activated, and suddenly the test was passed. The skill changed, and Kai also received a reward. As Kai thought about what he assumed would be a fight, he felt his eyelids grow heavier. The cult leader thought the boy had given up since the flames were dying down so quickly. But suddenly, he was surprised. Then he saw that Kai had survived. But the sacred flame no longer returned to the man. It was near Kai. He asked Kai what happened with the test, but not having received an answer, he was surprised again. Right next to him, Kai lost consciousness. Several days later, the man reflected on what had happened. He couldn't believe that Kai actually received the sacred flame. At that moment, Kai finally arrived. In their conversation, Kai said that the man no longer had to stay here since he had fulfilled his duty. But the man admitted that he was worried about going somewhere else. They also discussed the title of deputy head, which Kai could take, and joining the clan wasn't necessary. Anbis bommeint sakronosora, and jobi kai, albisens of the Sirivan, and I mean leadem, de Dronzer. A van de sai fiti komelinch, olbeat 3 to the gosherast of Boyanikan. But their cult has long been an enemy of the Murim alliance, so for Kai, commanding such a force is a valuable reward. And from the man's words, Kai assumed that they didn't want to make him the next heavenly demon. Then Kai agreed to accept that award. And then Kai replied that he must return to the beginning of the Great Murim War. Kai wanted to take part in that event. After this, the man was left alone with his thoughts. Now, he was not bound by duty and was free to do whatever he wanted. But suddenly, he realized what he had to do. He decided to return to Murim. The 11th floor area was called Taklan. Someone at that moment was hoping for their luck. Player Halloman hoped that this time he would have luck, and when the distribution of commands appeared, he began to check them. However, the guy was disappointed. Many of the names on his team were new to him. Then he decided to check out another team. But the second team only had strong players. Halloman continued to struggle. He unexpectedly saw Kai's name on the list, but he understood that even with him, it would be difficult to win. Kai had no luck either. Arriving at the tavern, Kai immediately heard the customers' discontent. Kai saw that all the famous people were put on Team B, and he was on Team A. This was childish and irritated Kai. The overseer on this floor was a man from Olympus, and perhaps this was their way of taking revenge on Kai. Afterwards, Kai headed towards the cellar. He asked if there were any rooms available. The man was surprised to hear that Kai didn't care about the price. Kai also wanted to exchange currency, and then he laid out on the table more than 300 Asgardian bills worth 1,000 points. Kai asked to take into account the commission and convert everything into points, and the man immediately agreed to fulfill the request. Having received the points, Kai immediately called for a 6. Kai thought the 6's appearance was terrible, but it was better than the jester. The 6 asked to say what Kai wanted to find, but Kai replied to the friendly 6 that he would just take a look because he was afraid that she had smelled his money. Afterwards, a store opened in front of him. Quickly flipping through the catalog, Kai looked for one item and finally found it. He needed adamantium. Afterwards, he asked how much the metal cost. The 6 replied that the material was of high quality. When asked why he needed this material, Kai replied that finished items were more expensive. But the 6 replied that adamantium was a very expensive item, and then began to praise it. Because of this, the guy thought that the 6 was too talkative. And the 6 also said that good things could be made from adamantium. Only a small number of blacksmiths knew how to work with this material, so adamantium was considered the stuff of their dreams. The 6 asked if Kai knew Hephaestus. Kai asked what it meant. 6 replied that finding a good blacksmith was difficult, but Kai didn't seem like the type to have that problem. Therefore, she believed that the price for Kai should be higher. She announced the price. 1.5 kilos of adamantium would be 1.5 million points, but Kai didn't have that much money. Then the 6 suggested taking out a loan at 10%. Kai replied that there was no choice, and the 6 continued that it was a wise decision. After closing the store, Kai said he would buy somewhere else. 6 offered to give a discount, but Kai believed that he could do without this material for now. Kai started talking about auctions, other floors, or buying another item, which made the 6 nervous. That's why Kai asked to forget about everything. The 6 was annoying, so he had to repeat it. Kai had no intention of bargaining anymore. Then the 6 began to lower the price, but Kai continued to refuse. Kai offered to pay no more than 850,000. It is unknown when such a buyer will appear again. Then the 6 offered 900,000. But from Kai's face, the 6 understood that he would not pay anymore. Then Kai managed to buy adamantium below the market price. However, he noted that the outgoing 6 were not delighted. Because he didn't know what the test would be, Kai couldn't go there without the dark stone. And even Hephaestus would need several months to work with adamantium. After the test, Kai wanted to meet him, but there was still a week left before the test. Then Kai decided to go for a walk. Neil attracted everyone's attention because of his outstanding talent and hard work, and now he was fighting monsters. Everyone was surprised that they were the first to pass through the dungeon of the 11th floor. Everyone chuckled that it was easy because of who was with them. But Neil told everyone to hurry up so they could rest before the test. Everyone thought that there was no point in preparing for the next test, but they remembered that Kai was on the opposite team. Even though everyone said that bad luck had ruined everything for Kai, Neil told them not to relax. Because of the captain's reliability, everyone agreed with him. Neil had never seen Kai, but he kept hearing about him. Everything around only confirmed Kai's abilities, but Neil's thoughts were interrupted by someone's energy. Then he was very surprised. He immediately ordered everyone to stop. There was a burnt body in front of them. Everyone immediately decided that the monster had died on the ceiling. Deciding to check, someone decided to climb up. That man turned out to be Neil. After Neil's blow, the monster fell to the ground. These were the remains of the dungeon boss. It was strange that the monster was burned, but there were no traces of fire around. But Neil discovered that the monster's skin had been softened by the fire and that it had then been stabbed to death. Presumably, the killer could have been a rancor, but why would a rancor clear a dungeon? Neil could only assume that someone of rancor level was involved. Afterwards, he told everyone to return, because the dungeon had already been cleared. Having received the Spider Queen's thread, Kai immediately put it into his inventory. Kai decided to save the material and use it later, and the acquired flame raised Kai's expectations. Kai didn't understand how flame worked, so he went to practice. The flame's strength was low, but it grew due to the enemy's emotions. Such power among the outer gods was terrifying, but now Kai was glad to have it. Returning home, Kai only hoped that everything would go smoothly as before. But he noticed that people had gathered around. Many people were waiting for Kai. Halloman asked the boy if he was Kai, and Kai asked what of it. The guy explained that they were all from Team A, and their placement hadn't worked out very well. Kai heard that the remaining half had surrendered, but not them. Kai wanted to get to the point quickly, which worried Halloman. He said they didn't leave because they believed in Kai, but Kai suggested they just didn't have enough points. The penalty for failure ranged from 100 to 1,000 points, a large sum for low-level players. Giving up would be a waste of points, so they were counting on Kai. But Halloman tried to object. He said they wanted to discuss strategy, but Kai advised them to surrender. The guy was shocked to hear that Kai was uncomfortable with the crowd of strangers. When asked if he would give up, Kai replied that he would try his best, and the words about giving up only applied to other players. After that, Kai left them in the middle of the hall. Everyone was outraged that Kai had humiliated them so. Halloman was also angry that everything turned out this way. Because of this, he harbored a grudge against Kai. Soon someone was looking at the power gap between the two teams. The test supervisor didn't understand how Kai had gotten into this. On Olympus's orders, Hypnos was to eliminate Kai, and if he succeeds, he will be generously rewarded. Immediately after this, he decided to run. But suddenly, someone wrote to him just before the start of the test. It was Hera. When Kai came to the test, he saw that there were 51 people, but fewer people refused the test than he expected. Kai hoped that such a trap would result in fewer casualties. Suddenly, a voice was heard. The supervisor who appeared announced that even due to a lack of participants on one team, there would be no changes to the rules. He decided to explain everything briefly and move on to the test. The essence of the test was to capture the flags. First, he showed what would happen if two flags were connected. A number would appear showing how many flags they had collected. Another question is where to get flags. There were monsters in the forest behind the players, killing which they would receive flags. Many were already looking forward to the challenge, and all that was required of them was to collect as many flags as possible. And the team that collects the most flags will be declared the winner. But everyone understood that in this test, the flags could be taken away. Today it was allowed to kill, threaten, and loot. 2 kings will also be selected for the test, but the death of the king will not make the team lose. But Kai immediately realized that the weakest one in their team would be chosen as king. Afterwards, they suggested to start the test. Instantly, a circle formed under the 2 teams. It was at that moment that their test began, and Yahello was chosen as king. While the guy was attacking, Kai wasn't surprised. He didn't understand how Yahello had even gotten to this point. Yahello rushed after Kai, saying that he needed to protect the king, but Kai thought that the boy was asking for help. Kai said that he would go collect the flags, and Yahello should sit quietly because no one would come for him now anyway. Kai was determined. Neil was the calmest of all the others on his team. The rest decided to finish faster because the difference between the teams was big. Neil understood why the players were relaxed, but he thought they were too relaxed. Because of this, the guy sighed heavily. Suddenly, someone asked if he was worried. He recognized Rael, and the girl was glad that he remembered her. At that moment, she took her power on Neil. The guy immediately recognized the effect of strengthening and healing. The girl said that the difference in strength was big enough that they could afford to relax. Neil asked her if she thought it was strange that the selection had worked so well for them. The girl listened to what they said in his hometown that nothing happens by chance. Rael asked if Neil knew who the king of their team was. Neil actually saw someone shining at the very beginning. Neil had a good memory, but that moment was strange. For some reason, he couldn't remember the face of their king. Yahello sat alone and watched the opposing team's score rise. Suddenly, someone behind them said that they had knocked most of the flags out of the monsters. His team said that it was now enough to defeat the enemy king for the situation to change in their favor. And there was only one person on their team who was capable of doing this. At the first meeting, Kai didn't seem like he wanted to cooperate. But Yahello became king, so defeating the enemies without protecting him will be problematic. Yahello thought that Kai would most likely return soon since he told him to wait. But suddenly the whole team tensed up. Someone was approaching them. The enemy said that everyone was told to watch their step. The opponents said that even Kai would do nothing if they killed the king. Team A immediately prepared to fight because there were 10 of them too, but instantly one of them was killed. One player instantly cut off his opponent's head. Yahello could only tremble with fear, and the enemy chuckled that now there were 9 of them. Because of what happened, Team A lost their fighting spirit, and the opponents only grinned at the fact that they were running away. One player tried to take Yahello away, but then the king of the team saw blood spilled in front of him. Someone was desperate to get the king's head. The man took merciless aim at the boy. Yahello closed his eyes in fear as blood spilled. Kai intervened in the fight. He immediately noticed that his instructions were not followed, but Yahello was still glad to see his savior. At that moment, the tide of the battle changed dramatically. The enemies trembled with fear before Kai. They considered retreating, but Kai was getting closer. He instantly hit the first players among them, and having killed them, he moved towards the rest. One player exclaimed that there were more of them and they had to kill Kai. However, he too was quickly killed. Kai's blow cut the boy's skull in half. This spectacle only made the experience more terrifying. At that moment, the enemy lost his fighting spirit. Only one person in front of them looked so brutal, so one player started begging for mercy and offered a flag. Kai immediately froze at this proposal. The others also froze when Kai accepted the flags. And then he asked the others what they would do. Everyone was scared by the words that they would give up the flags, or something more serious would happen. For the players whose lives were at stake, the choice was not difficult, and Yahello tried to kill himself, which is glad to see Kai as an ally. The guy apologized for his rude behavior and offense towards Kai, but Kai didn't pay attention. Kai then said that the first half of the game was over, but Yahello didn't quite understand him. Kai said the team's decision to split up was a good one, but the main thing was not to lose the flags. It turned out that Kai had 27 flags, which surprised Yahello. Having counted his flags and the team's flags, Kai noticed that the number was starting to decrease. Flags were being taken away. Kai then announced that opponents would now find it more effective to hunt players. Kai said that people would probably still come for the king, but the guy was afraid that they were talking about him. But Kai sternly asked if they had another king. Afterwards, Kai said not to leave him, because without the king, even he would have a hard time winning. Addressing the guy by name, Kai once again reminded him not to go further than 20 meters. Team B was upset that someone was giving flags to Kai. Neil thought it was pathetic that they ran away when it was 10-1. But this meant that even if they split into groups, they could be defeated. Suddenly, Rail intervened and said that Kai would most likely protect the king since he had met him. Then the girl said to contact every skilled player. Neil was surprised that she wanted to move to that strategy, but the girl said that despite the losses, their team still had an advantage. No one has any other suggestions left. At that moment, everything was decided. Rail suggested catching Kai and the king at once. Kai continued to defend the king and take away the flags. Halliman noted that it was not a competition between two teams, but 10 people against Kai. Suddenly, Kai thought about something. He had 100 flags, but it was too early to give them to the king. So far, everything has gone smoothly, but if the king is killed or the flags are taken away, everything will get worse. Kai decided to hand over the flags at the end, and the guy noticed that everyone was scared at the sight of Kai. He asked whether the enemy was aware of the situation or whether they sensed everything instinctively. Kai also noticed that his opponents voluntarily gave him their flags. Kai asked if the opponents had already exchanged information. Most likely, the whole team already knew that Kai was with the king and agreed to give the flags to Kai if they crossed paths with him. Halliman didn't see the point, but Kai suspected something. Suddenly, Kai noticed something, and the next moment, he intercepted the arrow. A little more, and the king would have been killed. Halliman fell to the ground in fear. At that moment, Kai understood why they were trying to save their lives. He realized that this was an encirclement strategy. Kai also noticed the network of heaven and earth, a trap from which there is no escape. Halliman was frightened when he heard that everyone had to be killed. He became even more scared when Kai swung at him, but Kai drew something on the ground. Then he told Halliman not to leave the circle, otherwise he would die. The guy was indignant that he was asked to wait in place and die, but Kai repeated again that he only asked to wait in the circle. And then he reminded that Kai had initially asked to listen to him if he didn't want to die. Out of fear, Halliman asked stupid clarifying questions, which Kai was forced to answer. But when Kai started to leave, Halliman followed him. Then the sword was pointed at the guy's leg. Kai was angry that he was not listened to at all. The enemy team believed that even with an opponent like Kai, there would be no problem if they killed the king. Besides, now he left the king alone. Then some guy told everyone to disperse. The guy thought that there were so many celebrities on their team that the guilds must be keeping an eye on them. And the guy hoped to defeat Kai. The spear was launched perfectly, but suddenly it froze. Afterwards, it turned in the opposite direction. And the next moment, a man from Team B was already killed. No one even had time to react to this, and many of them were immediately attacked. With the help of his skill, Kai was able to get close to his opponents and attack undetected. It took everyone by surprise. Kai asked the last survivor where Neil was. The other team already knew that Kai had been lost from sight. But suddenly Kai appeared behind one of them. Kai said they had used a good strategy, but they were so few in number that they couldn't even survey the perimeter. But someone asked again whether there really weren't enough of them. And Kai finally saw those he was looking for. Neil and Rail appeared in front of him. Suddenly, Neil said that he was sorry that everything turned out this way. It wasn't Neil's choice to have a good team, but that was precisely why he wasn't ashamed. Kai didn't understand what he was getting at. He was offered to give up because Neil did not want to win this way. Kai only chuckled at this, and then he said that Neil was too talkative. Expecting something like this, Neil ordered everyone to retreat back, and only he would fight Kai. But Kai said he didn't care how many opponents there were. Deciding to get started right away, Neil rushed forward. But Kai was ready for this, and he was easily able to block the opponent's blow. Kai didn't understand where the player from the 11th floor got so much strength from, and now he was interested in Neil's characteristics. They continued to fight fiercely. The sword of Neil's line could deal devastating blows if a man could hold it. However, Kai didn't seem to care about this. Neil didn't understand why there was such a difference in strength between them. Even with his sword tightly gripped, Neil lacked strength. Then he decided to gather all his strength in one blow and dealt the most crushing blow. However, Neil suddenly noticed an increase in characteristics. He asked what kind of cowardly move that was. Rail said that Neil couldn't win even with the boost, and the opponent was determined to finish. But Neil didn't understand her. Then he decided to look back at Kai. At that moment, he saw a purple flame around the guy, the same flame that Neil saw in the dungeon, and Neil was sure it wasn't a coincidence. He was sure that Kai was in the dungeon, but the technique was not similar to what Kai used back then. Neil understood that with his current strength, Kai would not be able to clear the dungeon on his own, and Neil no longer understood whether he was imagining it or not. But most likely, Kai gave in to him. Rail continued to support her ally. She didn't understand why the fight suddenly stopped. And suddenly, through telepathy, she heard that they should retreat, otherwise they would die. Then Neil asked if Kai had cleared the dungeon, and Kai noticed that the guy had changed his mind about fighting. Neil actually sheathed his sword. Everyone was amazed that Kai had cleared the dungeon before them. The others told Neil that together they had a chance to win. But Neil didn't understand what kind of victory he was talking about when Kai had single-handedly closed the gap between them and was a worthy winner. Neil said the battle could continue, but without his command. Rail was unhappy with this, but Neil told her that he valued the lives of his comrades more than his pride. Neil's team was a little sad, but they agreed with the leader. However, Rail insisted on her own, and the fight had to continue. Previously, Kai was told that unnecessary losses were unnecessary because later some people could help them and Kai should not get involved in childish games. Hercules said there was no point in slaughtering his own army. If Hercules had been in Kai's place, he would have definitely emerged from the battle without losses because he had the appropriate skills for this. Kai respected him, but he couldn't be the same, so now he couldn't imagine how everything would end. Kai wanted to try, but didn't promise that he would succeed. He chuckled that he would have to get involved in childish games. He was able to easily defend himself from magical attacks. Then it was decided to break through Kai's fire. But suddenly they were overcome by fear. In the flames, they saw a demon. Then Kai learned what the sacred flame looked like to them. The fire was fed by the fear of his opponents, but this made it harder for Kai to control it. The soldiers' hands even trembled with fear, but suddenly they fell to the ground. Kai realized that they had been able to withstand the flames for so long thanks to Rail's support. Kai even became curious about how many buffs the girl could use. But Rail didn't stop using spells. But she didn't understand why, when they reached the flame, everyone froze in fear, and how to defeat an enemy they can't reach. Then the girl used the punitive sword skill. And at that moment, she thought that Kai was finished. After all, the tip of the sword was pointed at the Kai. However, Kai only gripped his sword tighter, and Rail froze in amazement. With one blow, Kai was able to break her sword. It was complete nonsense for her, but Kai turned out to be stronger. At that moment, everything around became quiet. Then everyone froze in horror, and the girl remembered Neil's last words, and she had to admit that Neil was right. Then she transmitted a message to everyone via telepathy about retreat. After all, if everyone dies here, they will lose, even if they capture the king. But to everyone's surprise, Kai said that before retreating, they should give up the flag, then he would pardon them. They thought Kai heard telepathy, but he said he understood everything from their faces. And then he took the flag from some of the players himself. Kai, let's suggest that everyone not waste their energy and just hand over the flags. While handing over the flag, the girl asked if he would kill anyone. Rael suggested what Kai might do, but he asked if she was asking him to kill them all. Rael heard that Kai had rejected the guilds, but she believed that heaven might have attracted him. But without even listening to her to the end, the guy refused. The girl asked for at least contact information, but Kai refused again. But Rael asked to think about her future. After all, Kai won't be able to climb up alone. You can't conquer the tower alone, so why make your way more difficult? It is no surprise to Kai that with her attitude, the girl was able to rise high. However, the guilds were driven by pride and greed. Kai did not need this. because when the time comes, he will be the one who will unite the entire tower. Kai said they all said the same thing, and they were right. However, he said that he was capable of it, because it was his path. During this time, Halaman was very worried. He was very scared alone, but suddenly he saw something in the distance. Someone tried to attack, but the attack did not hit the guy. The enemy didn't understand how the guy managed to dodge, but they didn't understand even more why Halaman froze in place. Since the others were fighting Kai, these players wanted to deal with the king. Halaman was afraid that Kai was fighting alone against strong players, but suddenly he remembered Kai's words. In fact, there was no point in even running because they would catch up with him right away. Then he decided to buy time. Halaman decided to trust Kai and stay in the circle. Everyone chuckled at the guy for acting tough, but they remembered that the flags should be divided in half, and the next moment they pounced on the guy. Halaman was able to block the first attack, but it was difficult for him to stand still. After that attack, he almost left the circle, but immediately he was hit again. The enemy found the task very easy, and Halaman continued to whisper that they needed to stay in the circle. As he swung at the king, a puff of smoke appeared behind him, and then the enemy was thrown out of the circle. Thanks to this, Halaman remained unharmed, and next to him, a spirit formed, outwardly resembling Kai. At that time, Kai was walking through the forest. It turned out that he had talked too much with Rail. Kai believed that it was all over for that team. The main thing was that Halaman did not leave the circle. But Kai had another task ahead of him. The guy told someone that he could now show himself. Then Kai was asked how long ago he had noticed it. Then the king said that Kai was smart and the rumors were not lying. The enemy thought that Kai had an interesting ability because his skill deliberately burned the targets. Suddenly, Kai asked the man what the examiner had forgotten during the test. It turned out that Kai could clearly see his face. It was because of the guy's special eyes. The enemy was constantly amazed by Kai. In fact, he had expected Kai to look for the king once the trial began. But Kai surprised him. He almost completely beat Team B. Kai knew that Hypnos was known for his illusions, and apparently Kai had really pissed off Olympus. Kai chuckled that Hypnos' illusions were useless. This surprised the enemy. Hypnos knew that another player would have already fallen asleep, but Kai had great stats. Hera ordered Kai's death, and Hypnos thought that sending rankers after him was too much. But it turned out that Kai was not so simple. At that moment, darkness covered everything around, and some of Kai's abilities were activated. Hypnos once again tried to put Kai to sleep, and he noticed that now it was harder for Kai. He told the boy not to resist sleep. At that moment, Kai's eyes closed, and Hypnos closed the distance between them. Then he took out the prepared dagger. He said that it was not fitting for Olympians to condescend to people like Kai. But now, Kai had no chance to brag because he would die, and he prepared to cut the neck. But suddenly Kai attacked. This surprised Hypnos. It turned out that Kai was pretending, but Kai replied that it was not for Hypnos to talk about this. Although, in his opinion, the story about the naive examiner is funny. And now Kai had the advantage. Having prepared his sword, he said that Hypnos had lost. The night did not belong only to Hypnos.